Recorded.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are going to start the October 3rd Environmental Resources Committee. We're going to call it to order here, and we're going to start with item number 2, Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Moving on to item number 3, public comment. Staff, do we have anybody signed up to speak for public comment?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 4, approval of the September 5th, 2023 committee minutes. Motion to approve be in order. Motion made by Supervisor Drabeck, second by Supervisor Seefeld. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Moving on to item number 5, operational functions required by statute, ordinances, or resolutions. We got 2 today. Public hearings, review possible actions and possible recommendations to the county board for its consideration, county zoning changes. 1, Tim Vreeland on behalf of National Holdings LLC, General Agriculture to Urban Residential Town of Knowlton. And 2, Tim Vreeland on behalf of Andrew Borntrager, General Agriculture to Neighborhood Commercial Town of Wien. I just request that everybody please mute your electronic devices before we begin here. The Marathon County ERC is now meeting in public hearing on location plan specifications and purposes of the following projects. 5A1 and 5A2 listed on the agenda. Supervisors present, myself, Supervisor Longenhan, Supervisor Drabeck, Supervisor Seefeld, Supervisor Ritter, and Supervisor Sherfinsky. We also have Marilyn Bend, our Wisconsin Towns and Villages Association rep. Do we have anybody joining us electronically? It's a member of the committee. Supervisor Oberbeck as well. Thank you. We also have staff present as well. The establishment of the ERC is required by law for purposes of administration of county ordinances and land conservation programs. The committee must follow state laws and local ordinances as written. The committee cannot change or ignore any part of the ordinances or state laws, must apply the laws as written. Purpose of this committee is to hear and decide on proposed ordinances and ordinance revisions, rezoning petitions, and provide direction on land conservation and planning programs. The ERC will give a full and fair hearing to any person applying for a rezone petition. Taped recording is being made of the meeting, which will assist the preparation of written hearing minutes. The committee is interested in hearing all pertinent comments and questions. Each hearing will be opened by reading the public notice and allowing staff to present a staff report, including evidence from any on-site inspection. The applicant, anyone wishing to testify, will be sworn in and allowed to give testimony. Witnesses will be called in the order of those first in favor, second opposed, and then third as interested may appear. The committee may ask questions of zoning staff and applicant. It is necessary that we set a reasonable time limit on individual statements on the overall length of the hearing. To promote orderly discussion, anyone wishing to present oral testimony or ask questions relating to the hearing should state your name and present your testimony or question so it becomes part of the official record. We request you avoid repetition. Once the committee has all of the necessary facts, chairman will close the hearing, allowing no further testimony, and the committee will deliberate and decide in front of the public whether the applicant has met the standards in the ordinance. No additional testimony from the public is allowed during deliberation. However, the committee may question staff for purposes of clarification. After a decision is made, the committee will proceed to the next hearing. The decisions made by the committee are a recommendation to the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, who will take up the matter at a future county board meeting. Contact staff for more information regarding this county board process. And we'll begin by hearing the application of 5A1, Tim Vreeland on behalf of National Holdings, General Agriculture to Urban Residential Town of Knowlton. And we'll begin with our staff report presented by Garrett. I'll swear you in here quick. Garrett, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please proceed with the staff report.
I think we're currently trying to get the computer up onto the screens for you guys. Good to go?
We could, if it's okay, we could probably proceed, and then if you guys have the copies with you, you can follow along.
Yeah, I think the staff report begins on, what do we have here?
Looks like 13 of the packet.
That's what I got. Cool.
Perfect. All right, so this is a petition of National Holdings LLC, petition to rezone land, staff report October 3rd, 2023, for the Environmental Resources Committee. The petitioner is Tim Vreeland at 6103 Dawn Street, Weston, Wisconsin, 54476. The property owner is National Holdings LLC, located at 202-901 Irish Lane, Mosinee, Wisconsin, 54455. The area proposed to be rezoned is located near the intersection of Old Highway 51 and Locker Road. The petition of Tim Vreeland on behalf of National Holdings LLC to amend the General Code of Ordinance for Marathon County, Chapter 17, to rezone lands from GA General Agriculture to UR Urban Residential, located in part of the southeast quarter of the southwest quarter of Section 9, Township 26 North, Range 7 East, Town of Knowlton. The area to be rezoned is described as Lot 1 of the preliminary certified survey map, parcel number as listed. The Town of Knowlton Town Board met on September 11, 2023. Environmental Resources Committee is meeting today, October 3rd, 2023 at 3 p.m. A legal advertisement was published in the Wausau Daily Herald. Notice of the zoning change request was also sent by regular mail to adjacent property owners within 300 feet of the subject property. On September 11, 2023, the Town of Knowlton Town Board recommended approval to Marathon County's Environmental Resources Committee. Staff recommendation. The rezone meets all the zoning district standards as it relates to size, frontage, access, and dimension. The rezone also appears to be consistent with the purpose and intent of the town's comprehensive plan as indicated by the town resolution. Based on the information provided above, findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the town's recommendation, it appears the rezone request meets all the rezone criteria and standards for rezoning. Therefore, CPZ staff recommend that the Environmental Resources Committee recommend approval to the Marathon County Board of Supervisors. Should the rezone be approved by Marathon County Board of Supervisors, CPZ staff recommend that the town update its comprehensive plan to reflect the zoning change if applicable.
Any questions for Garrett? Garrett, where is the closest urban residential lot in the town of Knowlton relative to this proposed rezone?
Yeah, so if you look at the aerial photo, I believe it's on page 16.
Yep.
The lot directly to the south is the reason that we're doing the rezone. They're attempting to purchase part of the subject property that's owned by National Holdings, and that's general agriculture. The purchaser's lot is urban residential, so that's the reason we have to rezone, because they're bringing it into their parcel.
Interesting. Is that reflected on page 16? Because I just see cropland around that site.
Yep, right, you look at the certified survey map. This little area that kind of looks like top submarine there, that's the
page
portion
16
that's
yet?
getting rezoned. Yep, at the bottom, at the certified survey map.
Okay. Any other questions? Supervisor Stravinsky?
More just a question of process and
Sorry to interrupt you, Supervisor Finski. If we could use the microphones, so we're able to
Thank
hear
you.
it.
yes. So this is more a question just of understanding of process. Are they intending to purchase the entire tract or just a portion of it?
Just a portion of it. So on page 16, when we look at the certified survey map,
Right.
Lot 1 encompasses all of the neighbor's property, and then that little jaunt that's about 84 feet north, and then 86 feet back to the east and west there.
Yep.
That's what they're purchasing, because that is part of general agriculture, and they're combining it with an urban residential lot. They have to rezone that portion into urban residential.
So why would they go through the process of changing the categorization on the entire parcel rather than just rezone the part that's being sold after the fact?
They're not doing the entire parcel. They're only doing the part after the fact. But that portion, as described by the certified survey map, has to be rezoned prior to them being able to combine it with the certified survey map.
Okay, so the rezone is just the small parcel in question.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Let me make clear, you're talking about the bottom of page 16 with the CSM, right?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. So that lot 1, that's not what's getting rezoned, it's that top part?
It's that top one. Yeah. This is a preliminary CSM.
Yeah.
So it's showing what will be all in urban residential.
And this,
you
what
can
I'm
see where
seeing,
this dotted line here on there, that's where the lot currently is. And the
Okay.
bold line is where the lot will be after this CSM is accepted and after the rezone.
okay. But that reclassification in lot, what lot 1 is currently at, or I should ask, what is the Lot 1, what is that currently at? That's in general ag yet?
Nope, Lot 1 is currently urban residential.
Okay, so my confusion is coming from, I don't see that in the comp plan map.
Right, you won't see
Okay.
it in there because it
That's-
hasn't officially gone through yet, and that map
Got
hasn't
it.
been redone.
Okay, since 2005.
Correct.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you, Garrett.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, thanks, Garrett. All right, we'll move on to public testimony. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of the proposed rezone request, please unmute yourself or approach the microphone at this time. I'll call one more time. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of the proposed rezone, please unmute yourself or approach the microphone at the back of the room at this time. Seeing and hearing none. I'll call once. Anybody wishing to speak against the proposed rezone request, please unmute yourself or approach the microphone at the back of the room at this time. Seeing and hearing none, I'll call once. Anybody wishing to speak as interested for the proposed rezone request 5A1, please identify yourself at this time. Seeing as no one wishes to speak for 5A1 here, I'm now declaring the public hearing on Tim Vreeland on behalf of National Holdings General Agriculture to Urban Residential Town of Milton now closed. Committee will now deliberate on the application, apply the standards of the zoning ordinance. Supervisor Seefeld.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I make a motion for the petition of Tim Vreeland on behalf of the National Holding LLC to amend the General Code Ordinance for Marathon County, Chapter 17, to rezone land from general agriculture to UR urban residential located in the town of Knowlton, and to pass the conclusion of law and forward it to the county board.
Motion's been made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Sherfinsky. Seeing any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Moving on to 5A2, Tim Vreeland on behalf of Andrew Borntrager, General Agriculture, Neighborhood Commercial, Town of Wien. Back to Garrett.
All right, this is for Andrew Borntrager, petition to rezone land, staff report October 3rd, 2023 for the Environmental Resources Committee. The petitioner is Tim Vreeland at 6103 Dawn Street, Weston, Wisconsin, 54476. The property owner is Andrew Borntrager, residing at 120915 Blackberry Road, Edgar, Wisconsin, 54426. The area proposed to be rezoned is located on Blackberry Road, just west of the intersection of Blackberry Road and Fairfield Road. The petition of Tim Vreeland on behalf of Andrew Borntrager to amend the General Code of Ordinance for Marathon County, Chapter 17, to rezone lands from general agriculture to neighborhood commercial, described as part of the northwest quarter of the northeast quarter of Section 32, Township 28 North, Range 4 East, Town of Wien. The area to be rezoned to neighborhood commercial is described as part of Lot 1 of the preliminary CSM, parent parcel as listed. The Town of Wayne Town Board met on September 11th, 2023. Marathon County Environmental Resources Committee is meeting today, October 3rd, 2023 at 3 p.m. A legal advertisement was published in the Wassa Daily Herald. Notice of the zoning change request was also sent by regular mail to adjacent property owners within 300 feet of the subject property. All right, so this is a very similar situation as to the last one, where we're encompassing part of the neighboring parcel into a parcel that is currently zoned neighborhood commercial. On September 11th, 2023, the Town of Wayne Town Board recommended approval to Marathon County's Environmental Resources Committee. Staff recommendation: the rezone meets all the zoning district standards as it relates to size, frontage, access, and dimension. The rezone also appears to be consistent with the purpose and intent of the town's comprehensive plan and as indicated by the town resolution. Based on the information provided above, findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the town's recommendation, it appears the rezone request meets all the rezone criteria and standards for rezoning. Therefore, CPZ staff recommend that the Environmental Resources Committee recommend approval to the Marathon County Board of Supervisors. Should the rezone be approved by Marathon County Board of Supervisors, CPZ staff recommend that the town update its comprehensive plan to reflect the zoning change if applicable.
Questions for Garrett? So in this case, they're taking, on the CSM, they're combining that part that's to the, what is that, east?
It'd be the west.
Be the west.
Yep.
Oh, there's the W. Okay. All right. Anything else? Any questions? Nope. All right. Thank you, Garrett. We'll move on to public testimony. I'll call once for each of these just because should have noticed last time. We got a packed house here today. But anybody wishing to speak in favor of the proposed rezone request, I'll call once. This is for item 5A2. Please identify yourself at this time. Seeing and hearing none, calling once. Anybody wishing to speak against the proposed rezone request, 5A2, please identify yourself at this time. And lastly, calling once. Anybody wishing to speak as interested for item 5A2, please identify yourself at this time. If no one else wishes to testify for this application, I'm now declaring the public hearing on 5A2. Tim Vreeland on behalf of Andrew Borntrager, General Agriculture to Neighborhood Commercial, Town of Wien, now closed. Motion to approve would be in order. Supervisor Drabek?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to approve the rezone of Andrew Borntrager from general agriculture to neighborhood commercial based on the town's approval and finding of fact from staff and report and the conclusions of law.
Motion has been made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Ritter. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving right along here. We don't have anything for 5B. 5C, review and possible recommendations to County Board for its consideration. 1, acceptance of state local hazard mitigation grant program assistance. Director Polly.
Thank you. Do you think I can share my screen?
Are you
I
in
am
the
in
web?
WebEx, yeah.
I believe that's currently not my screen, so I think you might be sharing.
Oh, no, I haven't started yet.
Try, give it a shot.
Okay. I'm going to try it. Share.
There, it looks like it went on my end.
Oh, it's not good.
It's sharing on mine, but I don't see it on the
Yeah,
screen.
I do see it on WebEx. It is sharing.
Well, if we can bring it up, I do have the Park Commission. Sorry, trying to find my mouse. The Park Commission agenda up from this afternoon for this item. It was something that I didn't put in your ERC packet because of the timing of when the packet went out and trying to get the Park Commission packet out and trying to get our budget stuff put together. It didn't. Okay, there we go. So what we have received is we found out an opportunity this summer. When I say we, talking about Phil Rettmeister, our emergency management director, and myself, he always has information about grants that are available or emergency management items in the area that we could be looking at. And when we went with the West Side Master Plan, we identified a couple of facilities in there that could potentially serve the county in multiple ways. One being the park facility, but then also there's an opportunity that came up through FEMA where they're looking at establishing what we call safe rooms within the community. Those two facilities within the West Side Master Plan included the Marathon Junction, which is a facility we'll look at down the line and what can be done with that. And then the other one is the ice arena, which we've talked about multiple times. And we have identified the funding to move forward with the feasibility study that's non-levy tax dollars that's moving forward with that feasibility study. So basically, on their screen, I'm going to show you some items that we put in here for Park Commission. So it is available on the county's website if you wanted to look back at these. Sorry, I'm scrolling through a lot of items here. So basically what a safe room is it's really a space during those high wind and tornado events. And in our Marathon County, and I'm going to go to that document that Phil put together, but in our Marathon County emergency management plan, it identifies the top items that are of severe incidences to the area that could really affect our residents are those high winds and tornado events. And looking at the facilities within the county the county does not currently have a safe shelter or a safe room. School districts do have gyms and stuff like that, but they are not built to the standards of what they are now having these safe rooms built as. But most communities aren't building just a safe room. It is built as part of a facility within the community, whether it's private, public, it doesn't matter where it is. It's just something that FEMA and Wisconsin Emergency Management are looking at supporting. So where this comes in is we really talked about over the years, the fair, for instance, and if there was a severe weather event during the fair, where would people go other than getting in their cars and leaving and driving in a severe weather event? And there really isn't a place. The Eastgate Hall is full of windows, so that is not an emergency shelter by any means. The schools aren't open. We could possibly get in there, but even them there has windows. So these communities are looking at this based on the recent history of these severe weather events throughout the country. So that's what a safe room is. So the grants that are available is to apply for both these scoping grants, where you scope out a project in your community and you decide whether or not it could meet the requirements of a safe room and include that. Or they also have different grants for construction. So what we looked at with Phil and I talked with FEMA about this is if we're looking at doing any type of feasibility study for any type of facilities, that we could also get these funds for these scoping projects. So the ice arena is one that, because of its size, because of the way they are built, would be a perfect facility that could be used as an emergency storm shelter for the community if needed. It could hold thousands of people. You can get, the question came up in Park Commission today, what if there's ice on the ground in the ice arena and you need it during that time? But there are pieces of, there's a flooring you can get to put over ice that would keep the cold in the ice, not bring it up above, and you could use it as a facility. It's the same way they put basketball courts over hockey rinks in Major League and professional sports. Same reason why they can put a hockey rink over a football field or over a basketball court also, and those same arenas. So there are options for that. So what this would do is it would just be a scoping event to look at that facility, look also at Marathon Park, at that Marathon Junction, to see what would be the best place for a community safe room. And then could you build it as part of that facility in the future? How much of the building materials would have to change? How much would it add on to the cost? What's the scoping feasibility of that? So we applied for this grant back in the summer. Just a few weeks ago, we were awarded the grant of $300,000. And I'll go back to my summary that is in the Park Commission packet, so you can see that. There is a lot of information in here about a safe room if you're interested. But basically, the award is for $300,000 for this scoping grant. $225,000 would come from FEMA, $37,500 would come from the Wisconsin Emergency Management, and then there's a required local match of $37,500. If we move forward with this and we accept this grant dollars, our share is already met with the $32,500 that we have raised of non-tax levy dollars for the ice arena feasibility study that we're already moving forward with. And then there are other options for, you can use in-kind services towards your match as well. And we have identified at least $5,000, which would be that gap that we would put in as in-kind services. So there would be no funding requested from the county for this work. The scoping grant would look at the feasibility study, that would be part of it. It would look at the design. Once you get that feasibility study all put together, which we're already going to have, it would look at the design and whether or not those safe room standards can be met there. It would look at the site and whether the site needs testing. It would cover any testing costs. It would cover a public outreach, which we can do even more so than what we were planning to do with the feasibility study. And then it would do a cost-benefit analysis. Would this safe room make sense in your community as part of this project or any other project? And then along with that feasibility study, there's an economic development or economic impact piece of it that would be separate of this. So right now, the request is that the Park Commission did recommend to the ERC that we accept this grant. Like I said, there is no cost to the county beyond what we already have. We've already met our match with the project we're already moving forward with. We haven't started that project, so it still counts towards that. What it would do is would provide a facility that would be even more of a benefit to the community and provide a different usage of it to the community if needed that we currently do not have. Very similar to the scoping project that was done for the Forensic Science Center. And just for reference, the Village of Spencer has the only safe room in the area. They built this in 2019. They had been approved for a referendum to add on to their high school. They were able to make their gymnasium addition into a safe room, and for that, they then applied for the construction grant, which is another option. They were received just under $3 million, which was 75% of the cost of that gymnasium, to build that safe room or that gymnasium on as a safe room, which freed up $3 million for them to use of referendum dollars for other amenities that they had in the school district. So there would be that if we were to find out that this meets or matches and this is a good use of that facility, then we could apply for further construction dollars. And if they gave the Village of Spencer 75% of the cost of their facility, just under $3 million, there's a potential we could get a pretty good chunk of that facility funded by FEMA as well. You won't know until you apply or till we get that far. But this does not obligate the county. Again, same with the feasibility study, does not obligate the county in any way to do any type of construction. It's just a little further study to see if we could possibly make this facility into another community asset that could be used by the full county in the event of an emergency, whether it's big events such as the fair, whether it's a tornado that's gone through some area of the county that maybe has a trailer park that displaced people that they need shelter. You know, any event like that could be this would be utilized by the county for that. So this is just the scoping work of it, but it's a grant that we need to get acceptance of.
Questions? Supervisor Shapinsky.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Polly. Very good example of some synergy possible here. I guess my only question is I'm wondering how does this, we had a relatively small scoping project set out looking at the possibility of replacing the ice arena. Now we're looking at this possible grant, which is about 10 times the size of that. And I'm just, help me understand the ramifications and how this intertwines, because I don't see how that you can take the, $30,000 or $40,000 scoping project. Do we have a plan or a vision for an ice arena and marry that with this much larger grant and keep all the requirements separate? Do we have to, or, I guess that's what I'm wondering about, how that works so we don't, cross any lines, because it sounds like the scope of that initial ice arena scope out project could just be magnified tenfold. And, if you're looking at the safe room process, that gets into a lot of engineering detail that probably was not envisioned as part of the original ice arena scope out. So can you address that?
Yeah. Essentially what this grant does is it just provides us even a greater opportunity for the county to get a much clearer picture of what that arena could look like and what it could serve the community as. You're right, with our initial feasibility study, it was really just talking with our user groups, getting an idea of what the community needs are and then what it might look like. The opportunity for this grant gets us even further along to do more of that community outreach, to dive more into what those needs are, how it will be built, and it provides funding for those engineering questions that we would have to do at some point anyway, when you're looking to that final facility of what it all entails. This funding now allows us to go to that next step and really put that effort in to have a design or an idea of what the facility really could be and what those costs are, and it pays for some of those design costs up front, which would then save the county money moving forward. But it all goes together. We have to do, as part of this safe room project, you'd have to do the feasibility study anyway, because you need to know what your basic structure is going to be. In my experience of building an ice arena, it should be built with concrete push-up panels. So in talking with our architect and letting him know that this is part of it, he does have experience with FEMA. He doesn't really see a lot more requirements being added to the facility for a safe room because of the way that they should be constructed. Now, if we're going to do a pole shed like we have at Marathon Park, then we have a lot more engineering to do. But really, this grant just allows us to get even further along in that process and really dive very deep into what the community needs are and what it could serve our community as a whole versus just ice.
One follow-up. So one of the discussion points, both here and at the board level, was that we wanted to see a substantial, very substantial level of community involvement and community funding for a replacement ice arena. The idea was to move the county out of the business of owning an ice rink. Even whether or not it's a good idea to have, the idea was to get the private development to move that project along. So how does this grant and perhaps any other future grant for construction interface with the potential of using privately raised funding for that whole project?
It would just subsidize it. So, and I want to clarify, I think the feasibility study is not to look at least the direction that I understood, is not to look at the county not owning it, but to get private partnership to build it. I mean, the construction cost is where we know the county is not going to be able to support the whole thing. So it's going to be public-private for construction, but the county most likely would still operate it. But where this would come in is, because it's going to be a substantial project, is it's very likely from our contacts at FEMA that we've been working with through this process, is that if they felt this was a very substantial project to be able to fund the scoping part of it, that they would most likely be a very likely chance that they would provide some construction dollars to it. So what it does is, even with the Spencer School District, that was the $3 million was only 75% of that particular building portion of their district. They had a lot of other costs to it, but it would still be up to the community to find the additional funding for whatever is not funded under this grant. So we'd have multiple funding sources. This grant allows us to have, or the potential of a future construction grant allows us to have additional grant dollars towards it, hopefully reducing the amount of money we'd have to raise privately to get it built. So it's just another funding option, and it would be it would complement it and be supplementary to it.
I had a question in regards to the span of the feasibility study as far as the range of options the county might have. So with the Village of Spencer, this, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not an expert in safe rooms, but if this project required the Village of Spencer to construct that safe room in an existing structure, in this case, they did it in the high school, I think.
They added on to the high school, so the safe room
So
was
they
an
are
add-on.
So they are constructing something new there.
It was
right?
new, yeah. It's finished. It's like a big dome that's connected to their school, but it was new, yes.
So I guess my question would be, would the scope of the study be directly tied to the creation of a new ice arena, or is it just a question of if we wanted to add on to an existing structure at Marathon Park, as far as the safe room, like where's the target?
This particular would look at if we were to build a new facility, but if we were, when we look at our feasibility study, there will be portions of that we're looking at too, is they will do an assessment of our current facility and what the upgrades to that would be. So that could be, if that's the avenue the feasibility study takes, then this would form into that. So it would go along with wherever the ice arena is leading towards, whether it's a new facility or whether it's a renovation of the current facility, then the safe room guidelines would be to wherever that facility is. So if we were looking at renovating our current, then we would then use these dollars to compare what it would take to make that, to add the safe room criteria onto that. So it
Okay.
could go either way.
So it's not totally tied to that ice arena construction is what I'm hearing then. There is some flexibility there. Okay.
Yep.
That's, because I think there is something needed here, even with people that go into their cars at Marathon Park during an extreme weather event. I mean, that's nothing to say that a limb couldn't fall on that car or, and they've got the trees over there in the park, and I know that those limbs go down in the past or are in the park. Even you've got the 400 block series here in the summer, and this could be part of some sort of emergency management plan if something were to happen during an event like that. So I would like to look into this. I think it would be a good addition to the park. But my concern was, of course, how much is it committed to a future project, meeting the construction of a new facility versus, what's the flexibility that the county has that we don't have to go with that new structure necessarily, the ice arena. I want options is basically what I'm saying at the end of the day.
Yeah, and we'll get all, as part of this, we'll get all the criteria for what a safe room needs to be designed as, and then we can compare it to other
that's fair.
facilities. Mhm.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
Are there any rooms out at the park that could be used as a safe room? Any of the other buildings out there, are any of them constructed so that those could be used as a safe place? Of the existing buildings?
Currently, nothing that we have in the county meets the guidelines of a safe room, so anything that we have would have to be renovated to those guidelines.
Do we know anything about the upkeep of a safe room? Like, is it very costly to maintain?
Well, typically, it's a building that's used for everyday use, so
okay.
it would just be that it's available then during extreme weather events. So let's say this was part of the ice arena, and we had a tornado coming, but we had hockey games scheduled. We would cancel all the hockey games because you don't want them out in a tornado. But anyway, and then we'd open that up for a storm shelter and just have to work around it. So it's similar to sometimes. Well, if there was a flood or anything and we needed to open the gyms in the schools for something, we would just cancel all the other events. So that's what a safe room, it should be a facility that's not just sitting there for when you need it, and hopefully you never need it. It should be a facility you can use every day and then use it when you actually have to need it, and just, stop everything else.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. So the ask is to accept the grants then? Is that what came from Park?
To allow staff to accept the grant.
Okay. Supervisor Shafinsky?
So question, do we need a motion to that effect?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. So then I would like to make a motion that we allow the Parks Department to accept the state local hazard mitigation grant as described.
Motion made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Seifelt. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Well, I'm in Park Commission. I got to get back to ERC. All right. We are on 5C2, discussion of Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committees 2024 proposed budget and policy recommendations regarding modifications. You? Kick us off.
Sure, I'll kick it off, but I'll really not have anything of substance to say. This is really a follow-up from the county board meeting where there was discussion about, continuing that opportunity for the standing committees to really provide influence and impact on the budget process. As you all know, county administration and staff turned over to the budget to the HR Finance and Property Committee last week, and they accepted that budget for purposes of consideration. And again, John Robinson, chair of the HR Finance and Property Committee, as I believe a communication actually went out earlier today, really, again, outlining that process for continued standing committee consideration of each of the departmental budgets over which the standing committees have jurisdiction. And you have a number of department heads here that have prepared some information and put in your respective packet to have you review it and have them answer any questions. My introduction is really, I'm going to say the same thing at each of the standing committees that I said at the full board meeting. I certainly won't be as long-winded, but it's really a status quo budget. It looks and feels different in terms of the numbers because, as Christy alluded to in our budget presentation, some of the mapping with our new finance system is different. Quite honestly, we're still figuring some of that out. My department's budget has impacted a lot by mapping, and what accounts now are underneath administration that weren't perhaps under administration before. But each of the department heads are here to answer any questions you may have about what are some big impacts on their budget moving into 2024. What are some things that they're looking forward to in terms of expenses or revenues. But really, it's your time. And I know that, like I said, the departments have put some information in your packet, and I don't know which department wants to start. Christy's gonna start.
Yeah, I'm just going to.
Okay.
I just wanted to explain, we tell you that there's lots of mapping. We have lots of mapping. We had to map things. Things are not the same. So instead of just kind of telling you, gosh, it's a lot of mapping, I'm going to try to show you just an example of what we've tried to map. Now, your 2023 amended budget, your 2023 budget was approved in our legacy system, and we did map that over to our new system called Workday. And we are showing you and presenting you the budget that was approved through our legacy system. And you also have a actual, as of September 2023, report for each of the departments. But what we had done is we've mapped over 36,000 general ledger codes in a system that sorted things by agency and organization to a brand new system where we've minimized that number of legacy codes and mapped those. We have done a very diligent job of trying to get them all mapped correctly, but there will still be a few things out there that we are correcting. But we believe that you're going to be able to get your 23 budget as it's been approved in the old system. You can see where we're at. There are a few things that are mapped differently because we have a completely different general ledger structure, and your 2024 budget is there. I did want to just kind of show you what that looks like visually. You told me that I'd have a bunch of little numbers running around my head, 36,000, what does that mean? So I'm going to just show you really briefly to kind of show you we have a crosswalk, and I wanted to show that to you if I can do it, just so you can see what that means. So this is the crosswalk that we do use, and it's on the Works Help site for us. And you can take a look at the screen. This is what our employees that will use it every. This is actually the on the reds, and I'm not going to spend much time. Can you? I don't see that you guys are seeing this one. Okay. It's up on the website, so I'm just hoping that it is providing it to you. Probably.
Yeah, so it's Excel, so if you go back to WebEx. Oh, yep.
Ah,
Click the Excel.
got it. That's going to take longer than showing you this. I just wanted to show you what we mean because I'm going to go to, there's just a small caveat and warning to everybody. We are still working on the actuals. There's a few things that we're still mapping or are mapped incorrectly, but it will not affect your decision on how you're going to do the 2024 budget. But as you can see to the right, to the left-hand side, that's our old mapping. And all of our workday mapping is to the left. And we have to do a search for each of the things we have. And I'm just, this is what we've mapped on one side of it. Then these are the 36,000 general ledger codes that we have had to map to the new system. And you can see some of the things that we've mapped in the old system. This is one thing I want to point out. Transfer from other funds. Every single thing we did, we didn't have a way of tracking it by a work tag. That's a special code that we have in our new system. So every one of these, anything we did, we had to have basically one general ledger code to do. And now, as you can see, we are able to map those and track those in a much more systematic function. But I just want to give you that there have been a lot of people, not just people here, but in our staff that have been working on this diligently. And it's a project that hasn't finished yet, but I just wanted to give you some example of just the magnitude of how we are continuing to work on this so that everything's in the right spot. Everything is intact. Every transaction that we have is in there, but it's just taking some time for us to get all of our items right where we want them to be. So with your patience, we will continue to work on that and have that improved. And just want to let you know that everything you're going to be working on 24 is great. And we're just finishing up some of those, and that's why we have that transition. Now I don't know how to get out of here, so I appreciate your time. Okay.
Could I ask a question, possibly the finance director, administrator? So if there were questions regarding the budget, should we refer to the Kayenta system or should we refer to Workday?
The ones that you have today are going to be providing you the 2023 information as they are reflected in the Workday, and Workday has been mapped pretty close to what we had in Kayenta. Kayenta is gone, but we just wanted to let you know that some of those mappings are from, Kayenta would have it under an agency. That was kind of a separate grouping of things. There was an agency called Capital Projects. That has to live within somebody's department. So those things have been split between facilities and county administration. There was another agency called Transfers. That really is other financing sources and uses. So you have everything there. I just wanted to bring that caveat that we're still working on getting everything 100%.
Sure.
Where we want it to be. And this has been a really great exercise because even though we've been working on it with all the departments, they're like, hey, that if we look at things this way in our new system, we can report them and take a look at them in a way that we weren't able to before. It gives us more flexibility. So,
Okay, thank you.
If I could just add one thing, I think, one big takeaway from what Christy said is all of the work on the back end, it really doesn't impact your policy decisions you have at this committee or at the full board. I started by saying it's a status quo budget. It's really a status quo budget in terms of programs and services. How things are mapped, whether it's, Christy alluded to capital projects. I now have in my budget an account called special projects. It used to live in capital projects. It's good that it lives in administration because I was the person that people would ask to do the special projects anyway. It makes sense, but it doesn't impact any real policy business of county government. That's why the department heads are here to talk to you. mean, there are changes, certainly from each of the department's perspectives. I'm sure there are things that they're going to say, hey, these are significant changes from the previous year's budgets. You know, Dave is here from solid waste. I referenced within the document, I mean, there's new revenue coming into solid waste from our gas purchase agreement. That's a significant change, certainly on the department side. From my view on administration, there's not any wholesale significant changes in terms of programs or services within our departments. That's what I mean by status quo. They're here to answer questions. Certainly, the new budgets, they do take into account the direction the county board has provided in terms of priorities, in terms of budget assumptions, in terms of wages and health insurance changes. All that stuff on the back end is there. We're here to answer any questions you might have. And I really say we, meaning each of the department heads, to answer any questions you have about, hey, what does 2024 look like? What are the concerns? Do they have any concerns with the budget that I put forward based on the information that they gave me? So we want to be very transparent and keep giving you the opportunity to provide insight and direction, first to HR Finance, but certainly to the full board. So I really think, I don't know which department wanted to go first. If it, alphabetical.
Rock, paper, scissors? No.
Christie suggested alphabetical.
I know.
So.
All right. Hang on.
Chart of account numbers for different
You
categories.
turn your mic on.
I mean, it follows what the state Department of Revenue wants from you.
Excellent. Yeah,
That's exactly right.
I will shorten this presentation to that I will shorten my presentation to those two sentences for the next committee. Thank you.
Hold on, I'm gonna reshare. Nothing's happening. Okay, so I'm going to work from the packet starting on page 37. But yeah, each department did prepare a brief overview just to summarize where we see some of the changes in our budgets this year, try and give you guys a little more detail there. I think I'll start at a really high level. I think Jamie and Dave will as well, and then we'll open it up for questions on where you need more specific information. But to reiterate what Christy was saying, I think when we take a look at our budget, even at a high level, not everything is categorized the same way it was categorized in Kayenta. It's being moved into different categories sometimes, and in some cases, when we did that initial mapping, we, at least for CPZ, we took a best guess as to where to map that line item in our old budget into the new system, and we're finding, as we figure out Workday's capabilities, like Christy said, we're doing cleanup, and we might move things to different categories. So when you see these overviews, sometimes it's hard to compare. You can't really do apples to apples between what came out of the Kayenta and the Workday. Always, the lines aren't going to always match. But for CPZ, the big takeaways are that our revenues are projected to increase by about $90,000, and I'll explain where we got that estimate from. But our expenses to the general fund are also expected to increase by over $200,000, making that net change that was in the budget book of $125,000 difference to the tax levy. For us, the increases are coming from in revenue are coming from two main areas. One being that earlier this year we did update our fees related to zoning and regulatory and land division with this committee, and today we're bringing forth some additional fee adjustments related to non-metallic mining and conservation. That was as a result of the work we did with this committee earlier this year to determine where we had gaps or shortfalls that we wanted to make up in some of our fees for revenues. The other thing that happened is that we, as Christy was mentioning, some of these funds have now been allocated to our budgets that weren't originally in Kayenta. So for example, we have other financing sources that you will see has given us an increase in revenue of about $1 million. That's almost all predominantly the Environmental Impact Fund, which was the 3 projects the county board has previously approved, including the groundwater plan, the McDevco loan program, and the aerators at the Big O Plain. So that contributed to our overall revenue number going up significantly. In terms of expenses for CPZ, there's two main things that are driving our expenses up. The personnel and health insurance increases that every department will deal with based on the assumptions that were built into the budget, and also increases in our operational expenses that are predominantly related to the new CPZ functions of assessments, real property listing, and parcel mapping. Of course, that's not a new service to the county. It's just something new that came to CPZ in late 2022. And now that we've had our first full year with it, we're beginning to understand what the true expenses are, not only to support the staff that was brought over, but also to deliver the functions. So, the budget book did include our highlights for 2023 and our outlook for 2024. I don't know that we need to go through them all in detail. But certainly CPZ is very excited with the things we've accomplished in 2023, including getting that groundwater plan off the ground. We have started outreach for sampling on the eastern side of the county, and we have not had any negative feedback whatsoever. Everyone is very excited to be asked to partake in this well testing, and yeah, all good things, and they're very happy that the county is undertaking this effort. We also did relaunch the McDevco Pouts loan program. We talked about that with you last month, so we are taking applications and starting to fund landowners for that. Next Gen 911, when Christy talks about mapping, we also have mapping in CPZ. And so Next Gen 911 is an effort we've been doing with the Sheriff's Office and IT to update and bring our emergency management service or our emergency services into the 21st century by getting them linked to GIS mapping as opposed to the old spreadsheet methods. So, following the update to the strategic plan earlier this year, we also switched some of our efforts to zoning education and engagement of all towns in the county. So that's also highlighted in this report. We've had many meetings with both county and non-county zone towns this year that we think have been very productive conversations and are getting people not only interested in county zoning, but also just interested in zoning education for how to plan and develop their communities. And we're still on track to replace the aerator at the Big O Plain. We are shooting for the winter of 2024. So that is still an effort underway with many regional partners. Our conservationist, county conservationist, Kirsty Heidenreich, will give you an update on the Fenwood at the end of this meeting, so I'll save that, but promising news there. So, and then we're also working towards the reduction of the real property listing backlog with some help from LTE staff. We have been able to significantly reduce that to the point where the turnaround on documents is much quicker. We did undertake the assessments this year in the spring. That decision was made, and we're working on doing that on a permanent basis in 2024. And then following the Chapter 17 update of the zoning code, the administrator did put on his work plan or reprioritized his work plan to have the 12.04 assemblies ordinance updated. So we'll be giving you a presentation on that later in this meeting, but that's something else CPZ helped with this year. Previously, in terms of looking ahead to 2024, I think we've talked to you about last month about the farmland preservation plan. We're also working on a 5-year plan for our land information program, including all the new functions that we have within CPZ, trying to get a handle on where we're going with all of our land information stuff. We will be making transitions to new GIS software just to make sure we're staying up to date and making sure our data can still do what it needs to do for this county. We look forward to finishing the groundwater plan. We're also going to be starting that comprehensive update of the zoning code. And we also are getting prepared to move to the Lakeview Drive campus, which I'm told could happen as early as late 2024 or as early as 2025 if Lance helps us pack. So, I'll leave it there. And I think, Dave, you're up next in the packet. So. How would you like to do it?
Let's do questions by department. I had one, and then we'll go to Marilyn if you had one. I guess my question would be with the assessments and the what's the other word I'm looking for here?
Real property listing?
Real property listings. So that how do I say this? Would those costs have increased if they were still in the treasurer's office?
I don't know if I can speak to the treasurer's budget. I just
Sure.
know that they weren't accounted for in our operating expenses in 2023. We tried to keep it level, and then once we've had a full year to assess what is with it. But I guess I would ask Administrator Leonard or Christie if they could speak to that. So.
Yeah, our plan was to transition some of the costs. I mean, one of the very non-sexy things about assessments and property listing is
Paper.
she goes through a lot of paper now because they have to print the roll books.
Is that
And
by statute?
statute as well as past practice, I think there's an opportunity as we continue to develop technology and make people more comfortable with the use of that technology, that perhaps that budget can, the paper budget can go down. But, I mean, simply put, I mean, we essentially took staff from one department and realigned them, moved the revenue and expense to CPZ. We recognize there's some costs that probably didn't shake out because of the way that we have historically budgeted. We don't have a paper budget for each program, right, within the treasurer's office. We didn't have a postage program or a postage budget for each part. We need to, over time, transition those things. To your specific question, should it overall increase the cost to the county? I would just say marginally with the cost of inflation, as those things have gone up, and I did put in the budget book the inflationary pressure of postage. But it shouldn't have a meaningful impact. I'll just say operationally, kudos to Lori and her team down at CPZ. We have taken a significant backlog, and it's in the document Lori just referenced. From my perspective, that's functionally caught up to date. I mean, the turnaround is 2 to 4 weeks from when a document is submitted to when it's
Only on complicated
yeah,
documents. I would say,
complicated
too.
stuff takes some more time, but they've done exceptionally well. We've aligned that work with a department that has more people with that skill set to add bench strength. So when we do have a flow of these, we can throw more people at it, which has worked very, very well. And as it relates to the rollover process, the assessment rollovers, as Lori alluded to with the feedback on the groundwater plan, all of the phone calls that I have gotten on assessments this year have all been positive on the rollovers, which is a marked change from historically where our timeline has been a bit compressed and people were really looking for those. So kudos to Lori and her team. It's kind of the concept and the philosophy we've had as a management team is, you know, cooperation, collaboration, and aligning work where it is best done. And CPZ has very thankfully shouldered that burden, but make no mistake, it was an ask, and they took that on.
Marilyn, do you have something?
Basically, what you did is you transferred staff from the treasurer's office down to CPZ, or else you trained some of the people at CPZ to handle the new task that you had that was given to you from the county treasurer's office. Do you do anything from the Register of Deeds, or is that still separate?
Their functions are still all the same that they have been, so, yeah. We haven't changed any processes within the Register of Deeds that I'm aware of that have gone to CPZ.
No, I think you're right, though, on both ends. We took staff from one department and 2 staff members from the treasurer's office and moved them down to CPZ. But also, to your latter point, we trained staff at CPZ were trained on those specific tasks to be able to assist when the workload demanded it. So the simple way, like Lori referenced, CPZ has a lot of maps. They have people that understand mapping. They didn't necessarily know how to do the specifics of parcel mapping that was being done in our treasurer's office. But when we moved that person down to CPZ, he was able to work with that team to kind of broaden his knowledge and assign work as it came in to be able to deal with that increased workload. And I referenced this in past budgets, but we had a lot more property transactions over the last several years that contributed to that backlog. As you've all seen in the real estate market, it's kind of slowed down a little bit recently, which is a negative on the Register of Deeds revenue side in the budget, but it is a positive side, has a positive aspect on our workload side.
And so you have someone at CPZ that's going to be handling the assessment part?
Correct.
Okay, so the assessment part, but then anything that does with the tax preparations and the tax rolls and stuff is still going to be done at the treasurer's office? Is that my understanding?
So our role stops at reporting the accepted tax roll to the DOR. Yeah.
So do you do like the statement of taxes and the final assessment?
We report after the board of review and everything has been checked and balanced again, we report that to the DOR, and that is where our role stops.
Okay, thank you.
I was just also going to add the treasurer transition for those services, or I should say going from the treasurer's office, were reflected in the 2023 budget. So that was included in last year's discussion as well. I think the idea here is just to say that that transition, we also have costs associated with that transition going into the future.
Yeah, last year we did keep our operations level, even with the 2 new staff, and to assess where that was all going to shake out. So it is costing, we've had a full year with the RPL now, and we've just taken on assessments in, I think it was April. So, yeah, so.
Okay. Questions for CP? We'll go back at the end, of course, if there are other questions, but any questions for CPZ at this time? And if not, we'll go to Dave with solid waste. So I don't know my alphabet very well, but I guess Park. will go
Organized
first.
in the packet. Ron.
That's fair. All right. Solid waste.
Thank you, Chair. So as Administrator Leonard alluded to, status quo budget, but if you look at the solid waste budget, it looks anything but status quo. As you see, a jump from $6 million in 2023 to a $12 million budget in 2024. I can assure you that that over the years, solid waste practices, this is not all that uncommon, where we have an extremely large project in the neighborhood of about $3 or $4 million, where it's a 10-acre expansion or a 10-acre closure, where we completely double our operating budget. But then there will be a couple of years that go by where we don't do any expansions, where we don't do any closures, and then we make back what we had spent those previous years. So a few items I want to highlight on the budget overview page. We are working to decrease operating expenses. We're working to decrease personnel service expenses, and you can see slightly lower numbers than what was requested in 2023. Also of note for the 2023 year to date, definitely some mapping issues on this. There were, it's my understanding that some of our DNR tax, the $13 tax that goes to the state, is actually being reflected in that budget number, even though technically it's not part of our operating budget. So that's a significant deficit that it's showing in our 2023 year-to-date, just a mapping issue on that we're working to clear up. As we move into some more of the line items here, just wanted to highlight increases in total revenue, as Administrator also mentioned. We're seeing gas royalty coming in now. That will be a significant benefit. Also, just some items related to sort of engineering and planning, contractual services, other services. Some of those terms that in Kayenta, they were just worded differently, and we're trying to figure out how those all reflect on the new program. As we flip to our revenue page, just highlighting that we have a per ton fee, and these are all estimates based on incoming tonnage. As you can see, a very significant portion comes out before we even consider it as operating revenue. That goes to the DNR, that goes to Ringel, that we put aside for closures and long-term cares. Another big aspect is the other financing sources. So touching on the Area B closure escrow. So Solid Waste Department has about $15 million set aside in escrows that the state holds. This is basically an insurance policy for the DNR, where if we basically gave up solid waste operations. The DNR doesn't want to be forced with having to come in, close the landfill, do long-term care for 40 years. So they require us to have an owner financial responsibility and set aside funding. We did that many years ago, and we have over $5 million in the Area B closure escrow, and that's where a significant portion of that budget comes from to finally close the Area B landfill. Our fund balance is where we take for most of our CIP projects. That's been done for about a decade, as far as I understand, for any kind of major equipment procurements and system improvements, construction, items like that. We have some smaller transfers from within our own department where we take money from our operating budget and then set it aside for other programs such as our household hazardous waste. And then, of course, we can draw from some of those long-term care accounts that are, once again, in the DNR, that are tied up with DNR, and we can draw on those for long-term care expenses for Area A and Area B. Just highlighting a few of the top categories for 2024 expenses. Capital improvements in the realm of $6 million. Once again, majority of that is coming from our Area B closure. Leachate treatment continues to be a priority for us to evaluate, and engineering and planning also in the top three. Anything we do, DNR requires us to have a professional engineer stamp on it, so we can't really get away from that unless we were to hire an engineer and get those stamps in-house. So just a few, touching once again on the Area B closure account, $5.28 million. We would be finally closing this landfill. The last closure was done in 2004, so it's been 20 years. We're continuing to spend nearly $500,000 on leachate treatment from this hill. It needs to be closed. It's been a long time coming, and it will help us save significant amount in the future. Leachate management, in 2019, we were working with a partner with a local paper mill who rejected our wastewater, and we ended up having to work with a number of different municipalities. We're currently trucking everything out of county down to Stevens Point and Plover. However, we've already began working with the city of Wausau on attempting to take leachate to their municipal wastewater treatment plant right here in Wausau. That would literally cut this in half because it's all hauling costs that's associated with getting the material to where it needs to go. The next slide is the gas royalty with Verity Energy. This was the one that our administrator mentioned, the $300,000 of additional revenue. And in 2025 and 26, we're projecting that will be increased based on landfill gas flow. The more flow we can get for Verity Energy, the more royalty we'll get back in return. So it's a mutual incentive to gather as much gas. This is where we are actually going to take $200,000 to help allocate indirect support services such as HR, financing assistance, risk management, legal services, all those things that we would have to pay for otherwise. And it's important to note that our solid waste facility is a regional facility where we also serve Portage and Shawano County. So, having better allocation of these costs is what we've been discussing. Any other extra from the gas royalty would go into improvements in that gas system above and beyond what we need by compliance, beyond what the DNR requires. The next slide, talking about equipment procurement. This is the bread and butter of what we do. Landfill compactors are incredibly expensive, but if we don't have one, we can burn up a lot of airspace really quickly. The table really represents the importance of density, where you go from 1,500 pounds per cubic yard to 2,000, and the potential additional revenue that you can get from having a landfill compactor versus not having one. We'll continue to be community partners, doing everything we can to keep costs low for our towns, villages, cities, any municipality that has been partnering with us for the last decade, making sure that those curbside pickups are maintaining a competitive level. Also supporting our regional agreement with Portage and Shawano County. and competing with the private sector. We can always look at increasing our per ton fee, but then we also risk losing tonnage. So it's that tricky balance to make sure that we're right in that happy medium. So key takeaways: the renewable natural gas, significant capital expenses between expansions and closures, and sometimes those just happen to come together on the same year. And then future considerations for leachate treatment, internal engineering work, and looking at our diesel fuel and how we're using that. So I'm open for any questions.
Can we go back up to, I think it's the first slide in the solid waste section, budget overview. So I don't know, what is that? Almost $6 million increase between fiscal year 2023 and 2024. That's really what's driving up that 6.2 million to 12.4 million, right? And you're telling me that's coming from that insurance fund?
Yeah, that
Okay.
DNR escrow account, that's over $5 million, about $5.5 million that's set aside in that account that we would be utilizing for closure of the Area B landfill. That's a capital improvement project that we've requested. It's required that we close it. The only alternative is delaying the project, which we then just continue to incur costs related to leachate. So it's been 20 years, and we recently did an airspace evaluation on it and found that we need to do some regrading, and the airspace that we thought was available was very, very small. There's really no airspace to speak of, so it's time to close it so we can stop paying leachate expenses.
And then the other one is the fiscal year 2023 actuals, that negative 2.6 million. You said something about a $13.
Yeah, so $13 for every ton is basically given to the DNR. That's a $13 tax on every ton that goes into Wisconsin landfills. As we were looking through the 2023 actuals, we noticed that some of those payments to the DNR were being reflected in our 2023, even though historically that wasn't part of our operating numbers when we developed the budget. It was sort of it would come out before we would even consider that as part of our operating totals.
Which would make sense, right? Because that $13 to me isn't really the counties, it's just going right to the DNR, right, Dave?
Right, so there's the $13 that we pay the DNR, and then there's the long-term care and closure accounts that we also have to pay. Now, that's an escrow account that the DNR holds. They don't allow us to use it until it's actually time to use it.
So then, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but that $13 payment, whatever it is that reflected in the expenses in 2023 then? Is that what's throwing the numbers off?
Right,
or?
right,
Got
that's
it.
reflected in the expenses.
Got it.
Yeah, and the
That makes
$13
sense.
per ton fee, that usually goes back into recycling programs for the state of Wisconsin.
Sure.
Goes into some other, I guess, it's usually seen as a cookie jar for the state to evaluate environmental, concerns.
Sure. So we record the expense, but the revenue isn't accurately reflected in that revenue number, which you said in the past that just was never recorded
Right.
anyway?
Right,
So it was just
yeah.
going to the DNR.
Yeah, so that's being reflected, simply a mapping issue. We also had, this calendar year, we had a $2.6 million landfill closure on Bluebird, which is actually the first picture of our presentation here. But that was also a budget transfer from our Bluebird closure account that technically hasn't officially taken place and been added to our numbers. From what I understand is we're working on making that transfer through Workday and through Kayenta and everything. So
Sure. Okay. Marilyn?
What are some of the perks that the town of Ringo has for having the landfill out there? That I know there's got to be some expenses that they have, that you give to them for revenues.
yeah, so as you can see, the revenue, so $2.21 for every ton, and if we're estimating about 200,000 tons, then the town of Ringgold is getting about 440,000 a year, in addition to free curbside collection, a number of spring cleanup event, a number of electronics, appliances, tires, stuff like that that we take.
Do you foresee any expansion of the landfill that would take more land away from the town of Ringgold?
I don't foresee us, taking any sort of significant land away from Ringgold. We have 575 acres. Only 75 acres is landfill footprint right now, so we have a lot of property that we can work within before trying to go outside our existing footprint.
Finance Director Palmer, I think, had something to add.
The only thing I had to add is that the DNR $13 payment should actually be reclassified into a due to other governments, which is a balance sheet. So they've been tagged with the landfill cost center at this time, and we'll move those appropriately. So they're actually just held as on the balance sheet, and it's called due for other governments. And then the underlying one would be state of Wisconsin.
Okay. Yeah, I figure the accounting side would be handled at one point or another. I'm not going to try and play accountant. Last question I had. Where's this $3 miscellaneous revenue coming from in 2023?
Well, let me take a look. $3 of miscellaneous revenue.
Yeah, it just seems weird.
That is very odd. I suspect
Yeah,
it's
right.
likely. I suspect it's likely some sort of random mapping
Okay.
issue that should have been allocated to a different category.
All right. Anything else for solid waste before we move on to parks? All right. Seeing and hearing none, we'll go to parks then. Director Polly.
All right, I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, so my overview looks very similar to Lori's, and the first two slides of Lori's are definitely the same for me. We have a lot of cost centers and a lot of mapping in our department, so we're still working through that. Kind of a general overview is our revenues for 2024 are up about $100,000. Our expenses are down by about $100,000. No, not quite. Only about $40,000. But overall, so this is everything that we have within our budget. We are down for our operating budget under last year's budget by 0.6%. We had started with a 1.1% increase, but with the cleanup of the funds and the mapping and the reconciling with what 2023 had, we're ending up 0.6 below last year's budget.
Can I do timeout for 1 second here? I don't think we got these slides in our
Nope,
packet.
you did not.
Okay. I'm guessing they'll be emailed out sometime.
I could email them, yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
The detailed breakout is in your
Yep,
packet,
that's in
but
there.
not
I was just the slides. Okay.
Yep.
Fair enough. Continue. Thank you.
No, I didn't actually know the other departments were doing slides until today when I saw it in the packet. I'm like, oh, I need to one up here, get equal. So that's why my slides look exactly like Lori's. I just pretty much kind of highlighted the same things, which I was going to do in my talking points anyway. Where I look at budget increases, we did increase revenue by, like I said, about that $100,000. That includes some new fees that we're adding for an annual biking fee, a winter fat tire biking fee. A lot of that goes to 9 Mile, but it will be spread out throughout our budgets. We have annually, we do a 3% increase in our facility fees, and we have seen an increase in demand for services for events and for shelter rentals and those kind of things. So we do see that revenue increasing, and that's we always do that based on previous years, and we usually look back 3 years. Now with COVID in there, we have some skewed numbers in 2020 and 2021, but so far our usage has only been on the up and up, so that's good. We have some additional advertising and sponsorship funds allocated in their revenue as well. Some increases in our expenses that we've seen is we have our 3% increase in personnel. We do see in our line item budget a pretty significant decrease in our health insurance costs to our department. That is not because health insurance went down, but I think because now with Workday, we can more appropriately account for what our employees are choosing as far as healthcare coverage. So that is where we saw a pretty significant, about $50,000 decrease in what we had been paying towards health insurance, but that's based on allocations. We have in our expenses a 4% increase in IT services, and then a 3+% in utilities. It averages 3 through all of them. Natural gas and propane is extremely high compared to last year based on the numbers that we were given from WPS and all of the usage that we have. But water, electric, sewer, and regular gasoline, diesel is also going up as well. And then we do have about a $5,000 increase in our training budget for CDL certification. This right now is a placeholder as far as what we've been quoted to, and this is, remember my costs are 50% city, 50% county, so you're seeing the county costs. But with the new standards for CDLs, we have 6 people in our department that are new hires that need CDLs based on their job description and requirements that we have for them. The requirement for CDLs is pretty significant now with the amount of schooling they have to go to and the cost. We are working with human resources, along with highway department and public works of the city to try to figure out a more local, more economical education for getting CDL certification. So hopefully this number that we've budgeted will be lessened by trying to find more of an in-house program. But as of right now, we have not found that, and we need to move some of these people forward. I won't go through all of my highlights and looking ahead because it is in that budget document that Administrator Leonard put forward, but we have just a snapshot of our highlights. We were able to get some pretty significant projects done, I guess the biggest one being the water project in Marathon Park. And then looking ahead, we have the Rib Falls Park reclamation will begin. The reclamation plan was completed by REI and is now in the hands of Rib Falls, or in the hands of County Materials. They are putting it on their calendar as when to start. So as soon as we can get that park reclaimed, we can then open the entire park up to the public. And then, so we're working on, a lot of the other continuous improvement items that we've been working on for the last couple of years. And I just have an extra slide in there. So that's all I have in ours, but I'll stop sharing so you can go back to the packet. And our overall budget, it's very long, is in your packet. You'll see in our budget, there are quite a few numbers that don't match up, and that is because of mapping. So we have documented, where we moved money from one budget to the other, where we moved revenue from one to the other. It looks, for instance, like our recreation fees are significantly down from 342 to 293, but overall they are actually up 11,000. It's just that some of those dollars were reallocated to other revenue line items. We did the same with expenses. In the expense side, one of the big items you'll see is there's a $100,000 expense for 2023 towards the bottom and other fabricated materials, I believe. That was our small project budget that we always have had in our budget. We still have the $100,000 within our budget. Now it's just allocated appropriately, split between professional services, lumber, concrete, all the different materials we would use for those projects. We've allocated that $100,000 out. So it's still in there, it's just not a lump sum as it was.
I'm guessing if you're looking towards the bottom of 63, you see things like, where was I looking here? Some increases with like registration fees, tuition, meals, lodging. Is that related to the CDL increases, or?
The registration fees and tuition is the CDL increase. The lodging is just that was reallocated from a different line item.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
There was an $8,000, the only other question I had, there was an $8,000 law enforcement grant. This is on page 66, I think. $8,803 law enforcement grant that was received in 2023, but not in 2024. You know what that was for?
This is Maya from Parks. That is just a misclassification. When we went to Workday, that got coded incorrectly. it should be in the snowmobile, which would go into then state grants, culture and recreation.
Thank you.
It's one of our snowmobile grants.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay. Other questions? All right. So I guess we'll just go back to I'll just open up for general questions for CPC, solid waste, or parks. Is there anything in these numbers that you'd like some more clarity on? Is there anything that you'd like to see changed? Judge Stravinsky.
Thank you. So page 66, I just noticed under expenses, sundry contractual services. And we start out with 423,000 through September. Then we look at a total of 814,000 for budgeted for 2023, and then 713,000 budgeted for 2024. And I guess help me understand why there's such a big discrepancy, especially between what was budgeted and what's actually been spent. And, it seems like that's kind of whipsawing around.
Yeah, I'll let Mai talk more specifically to that. She's got the breakdown, I think, if she can. But the 400 is just, remember, that's just a mid-year to September actual, so that's only a partial amount. So if you look at 2023 budgeted versus 2024 budgeted, that's the total amount is what we actually budgeted. That's just what we've spent so far. But
is that the beginning of September or is that the end of September? I mean, that's more than 3/4 of the way
right?
through the year.
Yeah, through mid-September. So, Mai, can you help me out on the specifics to what we put in there?
Could you do me a favor and scroll up just a little bit on that, on page 66? I believe you're in the grants fund, and that's in the grants fund. That is where we make our snowmobile payments out of. That is, as well as some of our forestry grants. That's our number where we are paying other people. So, with the decline, I think that we have the same number of snowmobile grants. One of the things that is changing is how we are budgeting the supplemental grant. Now that we have Workday, we don't have to set that up in advance. So the supplemental snowmobile grant numbers, I know for sure are not in there. We are just budgeting for what we expect to spend and receive in 2024, whereas in prior years, we would have included that because we needed that sub-fund number. As for year to date, we've only paid out half, so I do expect that the rest of that will come out later this year, closer to the end of December or maybe even January, when we'll make the winter snowmobile payments. So that is the majority of what's in sundry contractual services on the grant side.
So I have a question. This is a better, thank you. I guess I have a question maybe for the finance director. I mean, I had to look up what sundry means, so it's a pretty general term. Is it going to get more specific in Workday, or how would grants be handled in Workday then?
The grants are all in a grant fund, but each of the grants themselves has its own work tag. So like the Snowmobile Fund grant has its own name in Workday. The one I deal with the most, and biggest one, is ARPA. So ARPA has its own. So you can drill into those once you're in the grant fund and then determine what types of contracts are in there. Sundries are usually not ones that you're hiring, like the professionals, such as David Wood for engineering, leachate haulers. Those are items that are it. So sundries usually the ones that are outside of those professional services that we contract for. So snowmobile clubs, because they're not really doing us a service. They're making the snowmobile trails awesome for everybody. So
So it does, the term sundry does serve a purpose then, okay,
Yes.
okay.
Mr. Chair, if I can add one thing to Supervisor Sherfinski's question, I think this is going to be something you'll see in all of our budget reports. Particularly when you look at budget to actual, and we're talking about through September, when you're looking at contractual payments, again, it's only payments we've made for work that has been done through that date, and based on one thing can be timing, whether or not, as my reference, some of our work is maybe for a different season where we're going to see a higher expense. But also, here's a different example, payroll. I mean, there's a payroll lag, right? So when we run the report, we're going to have several weeks of payroll that's not going to be reflected. So I think that's important when we look at budget to actuals. If you want additional detail on anything, please let us know. But there is that lag. If we have a project that's not completed, maybe it's 75% complete, but we haven't received the invoice for a large project, it's not going to show up. So I think your question is very, very appropriate. Like, what's we had a budget for 23 of saying 815,000. We're only about halfway through, and we're a little over halfway through the year. I think Mai's explanation gives you some insight. But also, as we break certain things out from that larger sundry contractual services umbrella, you'll see that dollar amount for 2024, the budget request is a bit less, $100,000 less.
Hey, thank you. Other questions, comments, potential changes? As I think I alluded to at the end of last month's meeting, if you do have requests, please email me. I am very open to calling a special ERC meeting. We can all have some more in-depth discussion, and we will go from there. As far as where this information goes from here, does this need to move on to finance, or what do we do with it?
Looking to me, Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
my
you're
sense. Closest. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My sense is if you just have, if you have a recommendation to change something, that's what from my conversations with HR, Finance and Property Chairperson Robinson, he's just asking that you put forward those recommendations if you do have them. I know this committee, you have talked about budget and programs for a large number of your meetings over several months. So if you have any additional requests for information, we can get that. But it's not surprising to me necessarily that you don't have a lot of recommendations. You had tons of meetings about this already and gave sufficient direction. And this is largely, like I said before, it's a status quo budget. There's not any new program, at the Parks Department isn't adding 25 recreational programs in the budget that we're funding, or we're not offering a whole new slew of services through conservation planning and zoning. It's the same stuff as we did last year, largely, with the increased costs and some increased revenues based on the work of departments. So if you do have any questions, if they come to you after the meeting, please don't hesitate to reach out. And Christy has one other thing to add.
On the sundries for the grants for the Parks Department, we can scroll all the way down into that, and I can let you know that the sundries are basically, as Maya had said, the contracts with the snowmobile clubs, and we have those. We can itemize those out to the grant. In the 2023, the major amount that's being paid out or is budgeted for the grant would be the 2022-23 snowmobile trail aids at $228,000, followed by the snowmobile Marathon County winter storm damage. And then in 2024, we have all of those snowmobile grants budgeted again, 23-24 snowmobile trail aids, winter, summer UTV, ATV trails, and then a $200,000 23-24 snowmobile aid supplemental budget. So all of those sundry contractual services, it appears, are allocated to UTV or snowmobile aids or projects associated with those particular grants, but we can break that down to the grant itself.
Okay. All right, so no action is required for HR Finance to continue to do their work, correct?
Not as I understand it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, anything else for today? Seeing and hearing none, we'll proceed forward. Thank you, staff. We are on to 5D, review and possible action. 1, update to the zoning fee schedule for conservation projects with signed cost share.
Yes, I can speak to that one. I just pop it up on the screen here. So one of the things as a department we are looking at are ways we can always improve groundwater and surface water quality. So one of the ideas that we had, and we wanted the backing of the committee, would be to add a cost exemption to our zoning permits for conservation projects with a signed cost sharing contract with Marathon County. So essentially what that would mean is if a farmer had a project that they were working on and they had a cost sharing agreement with Marathon County, it still requires permits. A lot of the times they're shoreline permits because they're waterways or things like that. But to help lessen the burden, the financial burden, and to get those projects going, we were looking to have those fees be exempt. I can tell you there's not a whole lot of those projects that happen throughout the year. I'd say probably 5 or so of those projects a year. So we're not looking at an extreme number of projects that would be exempt in fees, but we felt that this would be a good way to kind of help, I guess, improve water quality in kind of a different way. It's not it'd be more or less an incentive for farmers to share their projects with us and get Marathon County's input when doing these types of projects. So the way we were going with this was just to make sure that the committee was okay with it. We decided the best route would be to put it in our fee schedule. It's shown up there in blue. I apologize, it's a little hard to see, but it states conservation projects with signed cost-sharing contracts with Marathon County, and then exempt, which is very similar to how we have it stated for like all town, county, state, municipal permits. Those are also exempt from the permit fees. Again, it's just the fees we're exempting, not the permit itself.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And you said it's not going to be a dramatic revenue decrease for that because it's only a handful of permits.
Right. It'd be right around 5. I'm assuming it wouldn't be many.
Sure, but it's another incentive to help them work with us.
Correct.
essentially.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Supervisor Shafinsky?
Thank you, Chair. I guess my question would be, as part of this, which just sounds like a great idea, do you have some type of a plan in place for outreach? Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to incentivize conservation projects. Would seem reasonable to have some type of an outreach plan to maybe grow that partnership.
Yeah, if I could, we do have our conservationist, Kirsty Heidnerich, here, if you could help me out with that question. Do you have a mic? It's up to you. You can, I don't know if you have a mic back there.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to comment on conservation outreach instead of manure. Woohoo! It's all I ever get to talk to anyone about around here. We have many conservation outreach plans in place. And one of the reasons this topic is on the agenda is because we have increased conservation outreach to the point where we are designing more and implementing more conservation designs than the department has in the past. So one barrier that we came to in a project this year is we were doing a grassed waterway with the landowner that the water leaves the field and goes into the stream. So since it is so close to the stream, this particular project was in a wetland. It was in a floodplain. And then it was under the shoreline zoning jurisdiction. So it needed a DNR permit. It needed like 3 different permits. So on top of, a $30,000 waterway project, then that landowner is then also looking at many other permitting fees. So we'll still work with them to do those permits, but since landowners who are doing designed conservation projects with our department, ultimately working with us instead of doing it themselves, it does typically end up costing just a little bit more because we do have to meet very strict engineering standards, which, that's the world you live in, you know how that goes. So a lot of times that adds in construction costs and everything. So if we can simply remove that one barrier in adding those costs to the projects, it really makes it easier for everyone to implement the projects.
Thank you, Kirsty. Any other questions? Seeing none, I think a motion to approve would be in order here. Supervisor Ritter? With the motion, I'm assuming.
I will make a motion to approve the, which one do you want, zoning fee schedule for conservation projects with signed cost share.
Okay, motion is made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Sherfinsky. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. We are on to D2, updates the Conservation Services fee schedule.
Oh, I guess that's me. Hang on. Go over to your computer, Shad. You have it up? Yep. All right. Okay, so up on the screen now is just a few proposals to the Conservation Services fee schedule. Earlier this year, we did bring you regulatory and land division fees that we'd done some analysis on and made appropriate increases. So this is just closing the loop today with Conservation Services and also non-metallic. We did work with the conservation staff to discuss where we felt appropriate, that we weren't either recouping enough of our costs or there was some room for growth in that fee. I think the difference with our Conservation Services fee schedule versus everything else we do in our department is a lot of this is incentive programs where we're trying to get people involved. So like Kirsty said earlier, we're not trying to increase the burden with having excessive fees to participate in a lot of these services or programs to encourage farmers to do good things with their land. So we've only proposed a handful of increases within the Conservation Services fee schedule, including mostly on the larger farms, and I will say that predominantly our programs are with smaller farms, I would say, for the Conservation Services. So don't know if there's anything else to say about that. And then the other thing we added was also in relation to the equipment rentals that we have. We added a delivery fee just to recoup those costs in terms of gasoline and travel for delivering equipment that people want to rent from our department. So, and I think our chair has gone MIA.
Any questions on? Any? All right, we're moving along. I was trying to figure out what was the next here.
Well, so we would need a motion.
Do we need a motion on this? Okay.
Yeah, we would need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the updates to the Conservation Service fee schedule.
All right, motion by Andrew Vansky. Okay, Supervisor Shavinsky, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great. Continuing on. We're on to the update for the non-metallic schedule, right?
Yep.
Who has that?
I have that one.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, so as was discussed before, kind of in the budget talks, when we came to you with where our non-metallic mine budget landed, we were about 34% of the program was coming from the levy. And NR 135 gives us or tells us we shall recoup as close as we can to our actual operating costs for that program. So we wanted to do some updates to our fees in order to get that back on track and closer to it being able to all of the program be run off the fees that are generated. And how we did that is we utilized the Bureau of Labor and Statistics inflation calculator. We ran it through their calculator to get new numbers. The numbers we ran it from were from 2018 to July of 2023. And that data put us around and updated our fees for just a general inflation adjustment. So we started at a total revenue right around, it would have been $111,000. And now with the proposed fee updates, our proposed revenue would be around $157,000, which would put us right in the ballpark of where we need to be to recoup our costs for running the non-metallic mine program. I can say we did look at some comparable counties. Marathon County is not the highest or the lowest. We're right in the center of the counties. And the only thing that is changing here is Marathon County's fees. If I'll scroll to the second page here, this is the actual fee schedule that we'd want approved. The only thing, the DNR fee isn't changing. That's something that they require. The only thing that would be changing are the slot fees for open acreage, shown in the Marathon County fee. And if we go back up, it'll show kind of what they went through and the difference in cost from what we have now to what we're proposing. I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Questions? Supervisor Shavinsky.
Thank you, Chair. Shad, I guess my concern would be the first two line items, the 0 to 0.99 acres and then 1 to 5 acres. I'm looking at those two numbers, $125 or $280. Does that really cover our costs, particularly on the smallest end of the spectrum, in terms of what we really have in? That strikes me as 1 or 2 hours, and we've blown way past those numbers.
Right. So kind of how this works too. So those mine slot is consistent with how DNR breaks them up. So DNR breaks their fees up based on the mine size, which we have here. The fees, we have to remember too, the average type of, or the average size of mine we have in Marathon County. So the fees were already adjusted based on, we have a lot of mines kind of in the 6 to 10 acres, but maybe not so many in the 0 to 99. So it's trying to find that balance, because we spend a lot more time with mines that are from 6 to 10 acres versus the 0 to 0.99 acres. I would say the way, if our projected revenue, if it goes as planned, and we do have some mines that are coming online and also some that are coming off, so there is some adjustment there. But it appears that this would cover our cost and be sufficient.
Let me just have a follow-up there. I guess my question would be, So when we do talk about recouping the county's costs, what sort of things are we considering there, like staff time, materials? What are some things we're thinking about?
Yep, it would be staff time, materials, it would be travel, things like that. I believe it was 1.6 full-time employees for the.
Are you typically traveling for like a 0 to 0.99 acre?
So we do an annual inspection. A lot of the times we try and lump those together though. So if you have a couple mines out in one area, you're going to try and knock those inspections out the same day to try and save on gas costs and things like that. I can. Oh, sorry.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing you saying is that in aggregate, you're covering the cost to manage the program, but if you look at the smallest end or the smallest two segments, you're probably not covering the cost for that, half acre mine or that 1 acre non-metallic mine, and some of that's getting shifted to the larger operations to cost share over the aggregate of all of the program for the county?
So I think you're correct in some fashion there. I will say the smaller mines don't take nearly as much staff time. A lot of the time, some of these mines, the smaller ones in particular, they'll spend 1, 2, 3 years without any progress to them. They'll stay dormant. So essentially, our site visit is just confirming, yep, the boundaries have not changed. They haven't. And just going from there. So there's not as much work related to those versus the bigger ones. You're spending more time on site determining what all activity has happened.
And there's a bunch of statistical noise in there, like you said, about like if you've got savings in transportation costs, how does that shift things?
Yep.
If you can clump mines together when you're going out for your visits, Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? I think a motion to approve be in order here. Supervisor Stravinsky?
I would like to make a motion to approve the non-metallic fee schedule for 2024.
Motion is made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Vensky. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Those opposed? Motion carries. So we have been here for a couple hours now on, we've got 2 items that I want to have some considerable discussion on yet. I guess I would ask staff for 6A1 and 3. I guess how much time would those take for updates?
2 minutes each.
2 minutes
probably.
each?
That's what I'm guessing for
Okay.
Kenwood and what, maybe, 5 minutes or less.
Okay.
Collectively.
Let's power through these then. So we'll jump into 6A1, discussion on updates to general code ordinances from Marathon County Chapter 15, private sewage systems, and Chapter 21, non-metallic mining reclamation.
Yeah, okay, so this is just a very quick, just wanted to let the committee know, CPZ is planning on taking Chapter 15 and Chapter 21. So Chapter 15 is our private sewage system code, and we want to bring forward some language change to add some clarity to it, as well as some statute changes that have to be made. Chapter 21 is our non-metallic mining reclamation code. Again, this is for more or less some reference updates. I just wanted to go over a quick timeline. So October and November would be initial discussions with towns and ERC. December, we'd have our summary table of proposed changes, as well as a marked up draft for ERC and a public hearing. January, we're hoping to have our open house, and February would be another ERC public hearing, and then March with the hope of final adoption. It's just pretty quick, very, very similar to how we did 17 last year. The process is very similar. So,
Questions? All right. Thank you, Shad. 6A2, we got a presentation here. Overview of the Marathon County Assembly's Ordinance, 12.04, update draft, CPZ. Rick, that's you, right? Yeah, you're going to present, aren't you?
No, we're going to let Garrett present.
Oh, okay. All right, I guess Garrett can do it, okay.
Yep, that's going to be me.
I like this.
Okay, so, we ready? Okay, so over the past several months, we've been meeting with a task force and the members of the Marathon County staff, various departments, to do an update to the 12.04 large assemblies ordinance. So this is just kind of an informational update for you guys, and then we'll get some material out for you here in the near future. So basically, the reason for the update was Corporation Council did a review of our ordinance of 12.04 in 2022 and found that there are portions of it that are potentially, one, unconstitutional, and then the other portion of it is unenforceable. So as Lori had alluded to earlier, it was brought up as a priority for Administrator Leonard, for us and the various departments to go ahead and update that ordinance in order for that to be applicable, constitutional, and enforceable again. So the way that happened was a task group was formed with various members of the Environmental Resources Committee, Public Safety, and Infrastructure, as well as Marathon County staff from CPZ, Emergency Management, Health, Parks, Recs, Forestry, Highway, and then the Sheriff's Office as well. So the main goal of that department was to nail down some of these bigger policy questions. Do we want to have an ordinance? Do we want, or where is it going to be applicable? If it's applicable, if we're going to have an ordinance, what that threshold is going to be where that ordinance applies. So that was the main focus of that group. And we had been meeting since July, and we met twice a month in July, then August, and in September as well. So out of that work group came a draft ordinance that we will be supplying to you. And just a note that all the slides and all the references here are in references to that draft ordinance that'll be sent out to members of these committees at a later date. So the purpose of the ordinance that we came through is to regulate the assemblies of large numbers of people in excess of those that are going to be taking place normally on a subject property. And the reason for that is to help with things, impacts to health and safety, sanitary, various emergency services such as the fire department, police departments, transportation, and then other utilities that may be involved depending on the event. And one of those big policy questions that we came up was, where is this going to be applicable? So the task force, in conjunction again with the Marathon County departments, came to the conclusion that it should be applicable in all unincorporated areas. So everywhere that is not a village, the city, in those areas. And the reason for that is because those impacts to health and safety and those impacts to the resources are going to be, they're going to be applicable everywhere. It's not just going to be in an area that's a county's own town or a town's own town, and places like those. So the idea is to have a uniform applicability across the entire county, with the exception of those incorporated areas. So the other big policy question is, what is that threshold going to be? So part of this was our original threshold was 3,000 people over the course of 8 hours. So there was some debate on what that interpretation was. So then through works with that task force and the departments, we came up with the proposed threshold of 3,000 or more attendees at any one time or an aggregate over the course of 8 consecutive hours. So in that draft ordinance, we also took into account some exceptions. We looked at multiple different counties across our immediate area. Oneida County was one, Wood County was one, on some of the things that they have for exceptions that this ordinance would not apply to. Some of those things include established places of worship, stadiums, athletic fields, arenas, auditoriums, coliseums, things of that nature. Also, businesses where the primary product of that business is providing event space. And some of those things, we see a lot of those in county-zoned towns where they're zoned a particular way. And that's one of the caveats we had for them to be able to use this exception, is that whether they're zoned that way through a conditional use permit, through us or a town-zoned town, or their actual commercial business, and they're zoned correctly for it, is to provide that event space. So they would not be subject to this ordinance. The other question that the task force considered was, what are we going to do if a government entity is going to be putting on an event? So this is what we came to, the idea of government-sponsored events. We came up with the idea very similar to what we do with the permits for municipalities that are pulling zoning permits or sanitary permits or things like that. They still need permits, but in this case, they would be exempt from the fees associated with those permits. So they would still have to follow the regulations outlined in 1204, but again, those fees would not apply to them. And they would have to meet the specific guidelines on government-owned property, government-sponsored, and we do have definitions for those as well, and where the proceeds are returned to the government or the community. So since we're talking about fees, the general idea is that the applicant will submit a fee for the assembly permit, and it will be specified in a schedule of fees. Right now, we haven't quite developed that schedule of fees yet. We're waiting on working with Corporation Counsel as we go through the process of developing things for insurance and liability sake, and then how that's going to tie into our associated fee schedule. But the idea is that a fee will be submitted in order for the county to recuperate its costs for review and for administering the ordinance for each application. And then as far as recovery, the city of Wausau references something what's called extraordinary services, where it's services that are going to be above and beyond the normal scope of what we would provide. An example that seemed to always come up during the task force meetings was if we're blocking off roads for a specific event, where that's not something that's typically done on an event that's contained to one parcel. Those kind of things, that's another thing we're also working for as well. So the example the kind of definition that we have are events that require county-owned materials and/or staff labor. And as I have stated here, they may be subject to additional fees, and that would be based in that fee schedule as well. And we're working with Corporation Counsel and the other departments to establish what that is going to be moving forward. The fee schedule, correct. So as far as implementing and who is going to be kind of the one that's responsible for receiving the application, CPZ would receive the application and then distribute it out to the departments for their individual reviews. CPZ is not going to review things that would be subject to the Parks Department or to emergency management, because we don't have that knowledge base to do an effective review. So we would intake the application and the fee, and then we would send that out, the portions of the application that are applicable, or the whole application, out to each department, and they would then review their section as part of the ordinance. They would review what's applicable to them. And then as far as enforcement, if somebody were to have an event and they would need a permit but they didn't get a permit, we're still working with that, with Corporation Counsel, to establish what an effective enforcement for that is going to be.
Yes, I have a question there.
Mm-hmm.
So if the primary concern with a lot of these larger scale events would be public safety, why wouldn't the initial point of contact be public safety, especially with enforcing county ordinances?
I'm sorry, can you repeat it?
Sure. So if the main concern with a lot of these large scale events, as far as where the county services are going, is public safety, right? Like, you have increased law enforcement presence out there. And especially when we talk about ordinance enforcement, right, which is a public safety matter, why wouldn't the initial contact be for the permit to be submitted to
The sheriff's office?
the sheriff's office?
Yeah.
It's just a question.
I think we've made the choice that CPZ is set up with these types of processes, so we just felt like it was the better home in terms of distributing it out to the other departments and going through that avenue, but
Okay.
you want to add to that, Administrator Leonard? We switched your mic when you were up. No.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just echo what Lori's saying. I mean, in the limited research that I did, I didn't see a whole lot of contacts. I can't even recall any where the initial point of contact was law enforcement. A number of them had county clerks or municipal clerks be the point of contact because, as Lori alluded to, you want to set it up where it's kind of intuitive for the user, right? Another one that makes sense, Lori alluded to the fact that some of this stuff is going to be reviewed through Parks, Rec, and Forestry, through their department. I mean, when someone's reserving a facility through Parks, Rec, and Forestry, they know to go through that process, to go through that department, just like a special use permit for various events or property uses would already go through CPZ. So that was our thought process. Also, there's no requirement, when we get into the really deep into the weeds, there's not a requirement through these ordinances if your event is going to fall under the auspices of the ordinance that you have quote unquote law enforcement present necessarily. There's a requirement that you have appropriate, to your point, public safety services, whether you provide that through a security plan or other means. You're not necessarily going to be required to have law enforcement. Similar to Garrett's example, it might be intuitive if I'm going to run a marathon, maybe I'm not going to run a marathon, but if I'm going to put on a marathon, let's clarify, Jamie's going to run some, but if I'm going to organize a marathon event, I might think, I need to shut down county highways. I'm going to reach out to the highway department. Each individual event might be different, but funneling it all through conservation planning and zoning, just based on their processes that they have, was kind of our thought process.
We love to help people.
Sorry, Greg.
Nope, that's fine. All right, so kind of a timeline that we're looking for as far as adoption. In September, at the end of September, we finished the majority of the draft ordinance. Like I said, we still working on the insurance and liability, the fee schedule portions that we're working with Corp Counsel on to make sure that those muster. In October, we're holding the informational meetings today with ERC, and then Thursday, I believe, is infrastructure, and then next week is public safety. The idea is to get this draft ordinance out to the committees as soon as possible in order to get your feedback, your input, so that in November we can talk about that input and what you guys want to see, things you like, things you don't like, get some more clarification on the reason that things were written the way that they were, with the idea that in December we have the final meeting, and then with the hopeful adoption in January. So your role basically from now until November is to review that draft ordinance. We'll be sending that out via email when that's ready. And then when you have those kind of edits, those concerns that you have, we can bring those back to November. You're always welcome to email concerns or questions or anything like that as they come up to myself, Shad, Lori, and we'll try to help you guys out as we can.
I'll just add, we forgot to make the correction in the slide, so we are trying to get the draft ordinance to you by next Monday, so we're just tying up a couple things with Corporation Counsel, and then we'll get it out to the 3 committees, so.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to back up and ask some basic questions. And think, if you will, of the balloon festival that's now moved out of the city of Wausau and is out in unincorporated county land. One, how would this proposed ordinance affect that particular event, which certainly draws far more than 3,000 people? So it certainly, I would think, would fall underneath the auspices of this ordinance. And number two, and I guess how would it affect it? How would it change their operations? And number two, what problem are we solving by having or adding another ordinance to the county books? I mean, I guess that's the one thing that I'm having trouble dealing with this on the 5,000-foot level. Oh, this sounds wonderful. We're concerned about public safety in all its various aspects, which is laudable. But I'm struggling to go, having been involved with that event as a very low-level helper and also having attended it, I'm going, what problem are we solving? And that's where I struggle with this. Thank you.
I'll start.
You've just wore out the microphone.
If that were true. Thank you. I think that's a great question. First, for the balloon festival, that event, I don't actually think you'd see any discernible change. Our staff have been working with them. They worked with them for months before that event to do all the things that the ordinance actually asks them to do. They do a great job. They have EMS on site. They have sufficient volunteers. They have a parking plan. They had an emergency road plan, multiple routes in and out. They had all the things that you'd want in a good event. They're experienced event holders. I'd go back to the example I gave before where I'm going to put on a marathon, and I don't know all the things that I would need to know to put on an event. That's what I think the ordinance that you're alluding to, that hopefully the ordinance is a planning tool for me to help me do a good job to think about the things that you don't think about unless you do have that emergency management planning mind, the public safety mind. So that's the goal. In terms of your second question about adding a new ordinance to the books, interestingly enough, you already have it on the books. It's just got the issues and concerns that Corporation Counsel referenced already in the slides. I take it. You guys, sorry, I stepped out, but and it's to provide some additional clarity. So it's not a new ordinance. It's certainly not. I'm sure Lori and the team went through kind of the history of what led to this discussion. There are multiple other counties. I would hazard to say that every county has one, but certainly a significant number of counties have a very similar ordinance or an ordinance that seeks to get at some of these exact things. But hopefully you wouldn't, in all of the ordinances, we'd love it if the ordinance really wouldn't change anything about how they're run. My hope is that it's just a planning tool. It helps them understand, hey, what are you going to do? The example I always give is if you have 3,000 people all at one time for 4 hours, let's just say, people need to go to the bathroom, they need to drink water, and they are inevitably going to show up with stuff that they're going to want to throw away. So you need to have some sort of plan, and you need to know where they're going to park. And, it's the other thing that I think going through this that was eye-opening for me is the different issues that are going to exist in the rural areas, in the towns, than it would in the villages and incorporated areas, because you are so much further away from emergency services. And if you do have 3,000 people in, let's use, the location of the balloon festival, you're not immediately adjacent to the City of Wausau Fire and Police Department, which if there's an incident at an event On the 400 block, when there's a couple thousand people, the Wausau Police Department's right down the street. The sheriff's office is right down the street. Emergency services are much closer. So the ordinance hopefully will help with the, hey, let's think about what would we do if we do have a significant event and we need to get emergency services out to a more rural location in a way that is, one, timely for sure, and second, effective. I don't know, Garrett, Lori, Mike, if you guys have additional thoughts on those two questions.
Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the slides mentioned this at the beginning, but really the question of the threshold question of whether you regulate at all is a question for you. So that certainly is something for this committee and the board to consider is, you know, do you regulate at all and at what threshold? So as Administrator Leonard mentioned, we currently have that events ordinance on the books, but it's not enforced because right now it's not enforceable. So if that's a determination that the board makes in deciding, hey, this is our policy is we're not going to regulate in this area, then that's a decision the board could make as well.
That is actually what I was going to say. I'm thinking like a lawyer.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, what's the question?
Oh, about town input.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
Yep.
do you want to
So-
go ahead?
Sure. So the idea is as we send the ordinance draft to the committees, we're also sending it out to the towns for them to review and them to give opinions and review the ordinance, the draft ordinance, so that everybody can be involved. Sorry.
And I think that process gets directly at Supervisor Sherfinsky, your question, and Corporation Counsel's statement about, you know, do you want to regulate in this space? I think that's going to be some good feedback we'll get from the towns, whether or not they expect us to and want us to do that, because as I'm sure it was shared while I was out of the room, villages and cities already have the ability to regulate, and we're not regulating in that space. But there are a lot of, all of the towns look to the county for leadership in various forms. Certainly those that are county-zoned towns do so in more ways than the non-zoned towns, but getting that feedback, I think, is going to be one of the ways to address that very real question you asked. Is there a desire for regulation or not?
I was also just going to add, I want to see the ordinance first, so I just am going to look forward to that next week. Yes, Supervisor Rebek.
I was just curious on who like regulates this. Like, okay, if you have 2,500 people and you don't really need this, who comes and counts them all? Or do you just take their word for it?
I think it's going to yeah. I mean, these are questions we ask too. So, you know, we're not going to be out there counting. We're definitely going to work with people and encourage them if they think they're approaching that threshold, that it's in their best interest to get that permit and to come and talk with us. You know, we will also develop an enforcement process if we think somebody did, you know, if it's adopted and somebody did circumvent, like if we can prove they did it knowingly, but that's also another thing that can be hard to prove. So, but we're hoping that, you know, people will see it's in their best interest and work with us up front and at least approach us if they think their event might hit that threshold. So.
The other thing I was going to add, I pulled up, I think, the last meeting packet for the ordinances group, and there's things in here where it's recommended the amount of toilets, urinals, sinks that you have based on the number of people that you might have at your event. If alcohol is available, how that might change the numbers. So the idea of it as a planning document, I think, is worthwhile, because if you do want to have a large-scale event, you could look to this as a resource for recommendations as far as what type of resources you should have in place if you want your people to be safe, assumingly. So.
And I just want to add too, not only, like Jacob had said, it was going to be, you know, health and safety, of, event goers and things like that, but we want to also consider the people that are around the event, the people that are not directly participating but are going to be affected by the presence of an event of that size as well. And that's part of what this ordinance is hoping to help with as well.
Other questions, comments? Being none, we'll wait more feedback from the towns, and of course, we'll add that draft ordinance sometime soon. All right. Getting to 2.5 here. All right. Moving right along. Oh, I lost my place. Oh, hey, I have an agenda right here. How about that? We are on 6A3, update on Fenwood pilot funding. I think Kirsty's here. Yep.
There we go. Okay. So while we get booted up, I do have just a very quick and exciting update for you on our Fenwood bill that's currently in the legislature. So we've kind of kept you all up to date a little bit over the past few months, but we do currently, Marathon County has a bill in the Wisconsin State Legislature. It's AB 220 and SB 220, funding for the Fenwood Creek Watershed Pilot Program. So this committee has heard about this pilot program before. You've historically been very supportive of the work that's going on with that. We wrote a bill for the Wisconsin legislature asking for $600,000 over 5 years to continue to fund incentive payments for farmers who are reducing their phosphorus levels to below 50% of the state of Wisconsin standards for their phosphorus. And we went down and we testified at the Capitol before both the Senate and the Assembly, and that went well. A few weeks ago, that was voted on by the Senate Committee on the Environment, and it did pass the Senate. And typically when it passes at the Senate, it's taken to the Senate floor for a vote later on, and usually if it passes in the committee, they think they have the votes on the floor as well. So that's very encouraging. We just received word today that the Assembly Committee is voting on it. So that vote will be Thursday. We have heard good things about that, how that vote should go, and we are hoping that shortly after that it will go to the Assembly floor. So one amendment that was made to the bill by Senator James was he did cut the funding to about half of what was originally proposed. So it's now proposed to be $300,000 over 5 years. And he had thought that that would be a little bit more feasible for legislators to kind of digest. So please stay tuned. We will keep you posted. Maybe we can have a cake and a party or something if it passes, and we can all celebrate together because it really is kind of, a groundbreaking idea for how conservation is being run in Wisconsin. So very exciting. Any questions on that before?
What Assembly Committee is it getting referred to?
I believe it's called the Assembly Committee on the Environment. If it's not that exact phrase, it's very close.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, yep, Assembly Committee on Environment.
Yeah.
AB 220.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions? Not, we'll stay tuned for more. Thank you. And we'll move on to 7A, initial discussion on digester project proposed in Village of Maine, request from HR Finance and Property Committee for ERC input. We have Conservation Plan Zoning staff and Corp Council.
No, you're gonna have to do it from here. But I guess I wanted to ask Corporation Council to give the history on how it started with HR Finance, and then we'll get to the educational part.
Very good. So this which was originally considered by HR Finance at their last meeting as an educational item, and it was brought to HR Finance by staff who were approached by Wisconsin RNG VDG LLC. Their request is that the county consider utilizing its conduit bonding authority under Wisconsin statute to assist in the issuance of up to $45 million in bonding for a renewable natural gas production plant project. The specific statutory section allows the county to use its ability to engage in conduit bonding without actually taking on the liability, financial liability for the ultimate bonds that are issued. The receiving company or party gets the benefit of the county's bonding ability and potentially better rates. When HR Finance was getting this initial information, they asked that it be sent to a few other committees for specific input and to ERC for input about, when we're asking questions about this project, what are the environmental concerns that we might have. So Kirsty is going to talk to you about manure now, so she's very excited, I'm sure.
Well, I'm not alone. I have my colleague Matt Repgang with me. You guys have met him before as well. He's one of our senior conservation staff over at CPZ. So he is going to kick us off. We knew you guys would be absolutely exhausted at this point. So we anticipated that, and we have 4 slides. So do not fret. You can choose to ask no questions, or you can choose to ask as many as you would like. So we'll just give you, we're not even going to give you Digester 101, we're going to give you Digester 100, because we just assumed that this was not like a niche area of expertise for any of you. So we'll just, explain a little bit about this, because I was at that last meeting as well, and I discussed a few of the environmental concerns or comments that some of my colleagues in the conservation world had about this project, and that committee did feel more comfortable with ERC discussing, the environmental benefits or merits or concerns, and so you guys can hash out all those details here and then give your recommendations to the other committee. So, Matt, you want to kick us off?
Yep. So, you guys can see the slide here. This is just an example of a digester. This one's in southern Wisconsin. And these 3 large structures, these circular structures that are in the middle, those are actually the digestion towers. This digester here is fed by about 4,000 cows. It comes from 3 different large dairies. The one dairy is located directly across the road, and the other manure they truck in about 10 miles. They bring it into this digester to use. So this is just kind of an example of what one looks like. The large rectangular building in the back here is the solid separation, the compost building. Where this is located in Dane County, they're actually separating the solids and removing a portion of that phosphorus and taking it off-site, and they're selling it. They're trying to reduce phosphorus in that Yahara watershed for the Dane County area. So they're removing phosphorus from that watershed and taking it out of it. Digesters are managed differently depending on what their goals are. For this one here, they're producing RNG, renewable natural gas, and they're trucking it off-site. Here's just a very basic diagram of anaerobic digestion. One side, we're having biogas, methane that's produced, and it's usually either used for heat, electricity, or for the renewable natural gas. The other side is kind of our our byproducts of what's coming off of there. So we have either a solids component, it can be used for fertilizer, it's compost. Some facilities use it for bedding. The liquid side of it, that's our concentrated, can be concentrated fertilizers, or it can be used for flush water in the system, depending on how it's set up. So digesters, what they do and what they don't do, they do not reduce the amount of nitrogen or phosphorus that's in the manure. They do change the form of nitrogen and phosphorus in the manure. So for nitrogen, it actually becomes a more available form. It's essentially becoming a commercial fertilizer, more or less. So it's changing it into the ammonium portion, which if it's surface applied is more volatile and it can be lost through the air. And the other portion of it is also the nitrate if it's injected. Ammonium goes directly to nitrate. Nitrate has a higher potential for leaching. So essentially we're losing that organic nitrogen portion. Like I said, it's more available for the plants to use, but there's more potential for it to be lost also. So in talking with one of our DNR staff members, they said for some of the large CAFOs that are having these digesters on them, they're actually requiring them to use either a nitrification inhibitor of some sort. So that's essentially keeping it in a in a form that's not easily lost in the soil, if it's fall applied manure, or they're recommending that they're applying it at a time of year when the soil temperature is less than 50 degrees, so that microbial action is reduced a lot, and we're not having that conversion from that ammonium fraction into that nitrate fraction. Digesters do reduce pathogens in manure, and when they're properly managed, they do reduce manure odors. And usually the components that are coming out of it usually have an earthier or a compost smell. The things that, this is just an example of one here, the structure, and this is kind of just a very basic of what that round cylindrical tower looks like and what's coming off of there. So, with this one here, methane's coming out, collecting the methane, and then they're using that methane to produce either energy or renewable natural gas. In Marathon County, we do have one other digester that's currently being built on a farm on the western side of the county, large CAFO. That one's privately being funded. And they're, I don't know how far they are on, I haven't been out on site, but they started at the middle part of this year building it.
So the last little graphic here is just depicting here the natural gas transmission lines in Wisconsin. So those are the orange lines that you'll see on the map. The dots that you see at on the map are the CAFO farms, so the farms that have over 1,000 animal units on them. And the colors that are more of the yellows or the browns, those are the ones that have more CAFOs in them as well. So one reason we just wanted to show you this graphic is because I did reach out to the county conservationist in Lafayette County. We were trying to dig a little bit into just the information from the company that came forward to you with this proposal. And it is an out-of-state LLC without a company name, so we really don't have any information other than what you saw in those letters in the packet. But the consultant for that company just, came up in a Google search as working on a project in Lafayette County as well. So I did have a chance to speak with the county conservationist there and also the county board chairman as well, because she did recommend that I reach out to him. And that company or that consultant, they did go before the Lafayette County board and they asked for, a similar ask for bonding for a digester. The county board did have some concerns based on, it sounded like the amount of farms that were bringing their manure there. So it was a different scenario than what it sounds like is being proposed with this particular farm. But it ended up not passing at county board in Lafayette County. And the chair did say he's happy to connect with any Marathon County board members, that wanted to talk with him further. But that same company, then what they did do is they approached a separate farm and they worked with that CAFO to use just the manure on that site, and they put a digester in an unzoned township so that there was likely less regulation, to be dealt with. So a digester is going in Lafayette County, just not through the county board anymore. So that's how that scenario played out. But the county board chair did give me some questions that he said, maybe these are just tips that I would give your people, questions to ask. He said, ask yourselves, is there a natural gas transmission line nearby? So that's one of his biggest concerns, because what's happening in Lafayette County is the natural gas that's being produced in that digester is being trucked to California. So it is not being used locally. It is a lot of truck traffic bringing that gas a very, very far away. And I know in some research that Matt was doing, Matt had mentioned that there are a few states out west that are really incentivizing renewable natural gas. I think there's maybe 3 or 4.
California, Oregon, and Washington, I think it was.
Yeah, so it's sounding like just kind of digging around in research that some of the new digesters are being built where there's high densities of farms and then trucked out west as well. So he said to ask that, and then also just ask, how will the biogas be used? So will it be used to produce electricity locally? So some of the information and graphics that we got for today were from a beautiful publication through the University of Wisconsin that they put together, and they did give case studies of Wisconsin farms So some digesters in Wisconsin are being used to produce local electricity, and that's being sent directly to neighbors and farms and, you know, local people who can use it. And in some cases, it's also being used to replace natural gas in a pipeline in Wisconsin homes as well. So in Wisconsin, we do have 43 dairy digesters, and 22 of them produce electricity, and then the rest of those are producing renewable natural gas, like this one. So, and then one other phone call I made that I thought you would find helpful is we've been pretty connected with Adam Freehofer, who is the chief of the Groundwater Bureau with the Wisconsin DNR, and he's kind of helped us kick off some of the information we need for our groundwater plan. And I know in this part of the county in particular, is months ago where he just vocalized some particular groundwater concerns to me. So I did reach back out to him and just told him of the information that we had received. And he did give me permission to share with you all a little bit of information. And he did say he would be more than happy to meet with you virtually if you would like to talk with him further. He is out of Madison. He did say that he does have significant concerns regarding a digester going in at this facility. He doesn't believe they have a lot of extra capacity to run a digester there. And there are a lot of private wells in that part of the county that have very severe groundwater quality and quantity problems with them. So a lot of those wells have exceeded the human health standards for certain testing parameters already. These digesters do take a massive amount of water and electricity. And that part of the county is not able to receive any more high capacity well permits. There's just not water there. So, you know, most of the time when farms are putting in these digesters, part of the plan is likely to either expand themselves or to start inviting other farms to bring their nutrients to the digester as well. So, you know, in talking with Adam and with Lafayette County, one common theme I heard was that these digesters often do not have a master plan that's being formulated from them. So Adam has toured many digesters in Wisconsin since, you know, he works with these farms, and he said he has yet to find one that has some sort of a master plan. So before anything is permitted or built, they're not putting down on paper how much electricity they're going to need, how much water they are going to need, how much effluent they are going to need. There's not even a plumbing code yet for these digesters. And so these are Adam's words, not mine, but he said these digesters are constantly MacGyvering how to handle these challenges, because the first step is, you know, give a green light to projects and then figure out the rest as we go. So I just wanted to pass, you know, some of those things on to consideration for you so that you could, I know you like making as educated of decisions as possible. And again, both of, you know, these people that we reached out to, they're more than happy to talk with you in detail as well. So it's wonderful that we do have those resources available to us.
As my first comment is, can you inquire as to whether he'd be available for the, what are we, October? I think we're on Halloween next, aren't we? Yeah, okay. Can you see if he's available for that October 31 meeting? Okay. As far as the county's role, and I'm still collecting information, yeah, I want to be clear to the rest of the committee. With these type of agreements with the conduit bonding, can the county get like a almost like a development agreement where they can get sureties as far as protecting groundwater with the surrounding properties? Like, could we require them to be bonded in the event that something would fail, and they could have baseline testing with those wells prior to the installation of said facility, and that bond could go towards helping those people remediate their wells? Is that something the county could do? I'm looking at Mike here, so.
That's a really good question, Mr. Chair, and it's in the vein of one that Administrator Leonard actually asked our bond counsel, who's assisting us in the analysis here. There is room for the county to negotiate a certain level of agreements with the receiving company. The questions that we asked were more related to financial input that the county could receive. However, I think it's a good question. I don't necessarily have an answer, but potentially?
Sure, and don't get me wrong, I have several financial discussions, but I'm waiting for HR Finance to weigh in on that first. I want to try and frame the discussion today as purely environmental, and that's the first one that I have. In fact, I mean, if you think about the increased truck traffic, well, would they be, this would even be a public safety concern, it's just that if you do have more trucks going in and out of there, if they're trucking the gas, you know, that's a county highway that I think that this site is on. I think they're on K.
A&K.
A&K, yeah, they're on A&K. Well, that's a county highway, so there's a concern there.
And just, I mean, due to the weight of the trucks as well, a
Yeah.
lot more maintenance over time.
Definitely.
One very quick comment I forgot to add earlier. I thought Chair Gibbs brought up a great point in the last meeting. He had just mentioned that there were many large farms in Marathon County that had already approached him, hoping to kind of mimic this scenario as well. So he anticipates it being a growing trend for many of our CAFOs to move in this direction.
Prior to the inquiry from this site, or was that happening after this?
He did not share
Okay.
that.
If I can add one thing, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Good news, bad news, perhaps. I'm not sure which. Kind of in that same vein. On Monday, every morning, I have a call with some of my colleagues, and I brought up this very issue. And interestingly enough, in another county, a little bit to the west of here, a very similar request for $45 million of conduit bonding under Wisconsin statute was made for a very similar project. I don't know, I'll give you my sense as to why these are coming, and it's not an environmental issue, it's a fiscal one. 4 years ago, the cost of capital, the difference, I should say, the delta between the cost of capital that a large industrial corporation like these farms are, that they could acquire capital, the cost was not significantly above the cost that the county, through the conduit bonding statute, can procure capital. That, of course, that delta has grown. So my sense, what they're looking for the county, what they're using this statute for, is low-cost capital. That's the only thing I'll say. Of course, the environmental concerns, that's something you'll have to weigh, and the full board will have to weigh. I'll just tell you in terms of process. I got a phone call on the first week of September. This entity wanted the county board to make its decision in September. I said that was highly unlikely based on the schedule that the county board has, and they last communicated indicating they'd really appreciate it if this was done in October. I'm not saying that you need to make a decision in October. We will communicate to them that we're working through the process. Just building on what Kirsty had said, my sense is these projects, where there is a will, they will find a way to do it. And I think Kirsty's comment about, finding a municipality in which they can put them up with little, if any, zoning constraints, is one of the things they're going to think about. If I were in their shoes, that's what I would think about. As it relates to natural gas trucking, I have not heard of anyone trucking gas that far. I learned far more about renewable natural gas than I ever thought I would when Mike and I were working with Dave on the solid waste agreement. We do have a pipeline that, of course, runs immediately adjacent to the solid waste department. As part of the agreement we have with the third-party renewable natural gas entity there, they are putting in an injection site into that pipeline. They're negotiating that agreement. I suggested that to this third party. I said, hey, just to let you know, the county, on county property, adjacent to county property, there is going to be this injection site. I don't know their plans with respect to trucking gas. The little bit Mike and I learned through the process with those previous vendors is that's exceedingly expensive. Not so much, the fuel is the one piece. It's the labor to have a truck driver spend hours and hours in a vehicle. There is, as on that site, working with some of these other producers, we know in in Denmark, which is south of the Green Bay area, there's also an injection site for a large dairy digester, I believe, for a renewable natural gas operation. But that's all I had. I mean, if you have any questions, we're certainly going to try to get you the information. CPZ staff can take the lead on the environmental piece. Certainly, there's the financial component. Just to clarify what Mike said, there's not only based on our read of the statute and our conference with bond counsel, our financial manager, and our auditor, we take on no liability risk through this statute. It has no impact on our bond rating, whether or not they default, and it has no impact, based on all the information we've gotten to this point, on our utilization of bonding capacity under Wisconsin law that I referenced in the budget.
I guess I would just add what Kirsty's comment, or the comment that Kirsty made earlier got me thinking, because if they are located in a municipality where they aren't empowered to, I don't know, stop it through zoning or licensing, then the county's almost in a position where they would want to work with them to get some sureties to protect those surrounding property owners. That's what I'm concerned about. If they're going to do it anyway, we should try and get some protections, and maybe this is a way that you can offer something.
Yeah. What is unfortunate is that the Village of Maine does not have an animal waste ordinance, so they have no regulation over animal waste. We talked about this a little bit in our last meeting. Matt, our resident animal waste ordinance expert here, do you want to just give like a 60-second history of like reaching out to them? And
So when they incorporated,
Microphone, please.
sorry, when they incorporated several years ago, I can't remember when that was, but at that time, our department approached them because they were unincorporated and they were covered under the animal waste ordinance for the county. Approached them about signing a resolution that they essentially adopted into their, into their, yes. And then at that point, we would oversee it. They had enough other things going on that lost track of it, and it never came back up again. So that's where they're currently at now. So if there's any structures that are built in the Village of Maine, if they're built by anybody that's less than what a CAFO is, they can pretty much build them however they want. At CAFO level, DNR has to still review the plans and everything, but as far as our office, we don't have any authority at all.
Sure. Okay. We're going up on 3 hours here, but we can do some follow-up at the next meeting. What is HR Finance's ask of ERC at this time?
I think Exec was actually the entity that started talking about who do they want to have look at this.
I don't think ERC got mentioned in those discussions. I think it was EEDC and HR Finance.
Right. HR Finance had a discussion and then said, hey, this should also
That's how
go.
it got here.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of an iterative process, but I do see you have a question, Mr. Chair, from Supervisor Sherfinski.
Oh, I'm sorry. Supervisor Sherfinski.
That's okay. Thank you. Yeah, and I don't really want to extend the meeting, but I do have some questions, and I guess the first thought is, why are we involved? If we're here, if the extent of our involvement is to provide a conduit for easy financing, is that really something that's in the best interests of everybody in Marathon County? Why would we be doing that? I think we'd need to see some justification for that. That could come in a number of different ways. I think we need to look at the 10,000-foot overview of the environmental considerations. It sounds great, but are we really, from an environmental standpoint, are we really doing something that's a net positive, a net negative, or just spinning wheels for the sake because it sounds good. Oh, you're dealing with manure, and that's something that sounds like it's a great idea. The other thing would be the micro-environmental aspects of, I heard the vast amounts of water needed for the process. So what are the impacts locally to the surrounding property owners? What does surrounding property owners mean in this context? You know, are we talking, you know, within a quarter mile? Are we talking a half mile? Are we talking 5 miles? I think those might be reasons why we might want to be involved. And then what is our authority that we would actually have to potentially handle this in terms of zoning criteria like we do through the other parts of the zoning process in the county? Do we even have any authority to do that? So those would be my questions.
I guess I would just say I think the main reason it got, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I didn't receive the request myself, but I think the reason it's in front of us is because we did receive the request from the, I don't know, from the dairy or from the developer. I don't know where that stuff came from.
Even better, from a lawyer.
Yeah.
It was from the counsel for the LLC that's working on, that prepared the documents.
Yeah, so I think it kind of tumbled down here, so, yeah. I would just say, as far as communicating stuff to HR Finance, is that, I don't know, I want to hear from that, Adam, thank you. And that there are some environmental concerns from this group as far as what the county's role is. Is that fair?
I think there are a number of questions that have been raised, and you know, the Mr. Administrator had mentioned that he had been approached on, well, we'd like an answer in September. Then that became, well, we'd like an answer in October. I'm going to respectfully suggest that, given the amount of uncertainty and due diligence that's necessary if we do our jobs correctly, we're probably looking at perhaps by the end of the year or January. Might be far more appropriate.
It's going through the process. Of what year? Yeah.
And I don't know if there's maybe a list of questions we can put together. I will just say I am pretty sure Adam also has young kids. And it is Halloween, and I have kids, and so does Matt. So I rarely pull the parent card. However, like that magical
You're choosing
hour
your
of
kids over
3 to
us.
6 p.m.
Oh my God.
You get a window of about this much time in parenthood where that's the day they absolutely live for, and it's both of my kids' favorite holidays. So I probably won't be here because I took a blood oath to my children.
That's
and Tony's
understandable.
giving me a thumbs up, so I don't feel bad saying that. But you guys know how it
understandable.
goes, you know. So
Yep. Definitely.
yeah.
Okay. Well, we appreciate the information, and we'll have some more discussion next month then. And I think we'll also wait to hear what HR Finance's coming determinations are as well. So, all right. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Kirsty. All right. Finally. Next meeting, October 31st, 2023, 3 p.m., Assembly Room, and future agenda items. A, committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussion, and B, announcements, requests, correspondence. 2024 ERC meeting dates, I think that's the last page in your packets. Staff usually try to provide these prior to next term. That way we just get it on everybody's schedules, so.
Yeah, and there is one, two notes on that. One is that we're proposing that the January 1 take place on Friday, January 5th at 1 p.m. because we cannot hold it as the rules dictate, because that is a holiday. And I'm looking to Supervisor Seafelt. Did Parks and Forestry also decide? I know they were trying to tie into when we would reschedule that. Okay.
Looking on the 4th, doing Parks and Forestry. The only two that it really would affect would be myself and Supervisor Rosenberg. We both sit on the EED, which is on the 4th.
Okay.
So we're going to time it so it's an all-day event.
Okay.
Sounds so excited.
And
So,
I will say the reason we went with Friday was trying to avoid, I mean, making sure the assembly room was available as well.
I was just
Because-
gonna say,
yeah.
that's the main, yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we've got plenty of time before January anyway.
Okay.
If there's something else that comes up, so, okay.
And the county clerk did want me to just remind that any dates after April would be subject to change if the rules review changed it, so, is my understanding.
Yep,
So-
yep. Okay, AP 1 is done. We're on to number 9.
I'll move.
Supervisor Sherfinsky
I will move to adjourn.
with the motion, second by Supervisor Vensky. He didn't put his hand down. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Those opposed, motion carries. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, staff. Appreciate it.
This meeting is no longer being recorded.
Yeah, you're right.